Coming to you live from Parliament Buildings in Nairobi. It is Wednesday, 29th day of August, 2018. It is the last Wednesday of the month of August, and the members of the National Assembly are getting ready for a morning sitting. It is their traditional of business from provisions of the standing order, and this is to make it possible for members this morning to consider matters that are not self-sponsored. And these are three key pieces of proposed legislation. There is the Finance Bill, National Assembly Bill number 29 of the year 2018. This particular document, the clauses therein have already been discussed by members in the second reading, and this morning the chairperson, Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning, Honorable Joseph Limo, is expected, or rather having concluded replying to that particular bill. There shall be the question being put. It is a bill that contains 13 laws that are to be amended, including the Betting, Lotteries and Gaming Act, Cap 131, the Marine Insurance Act, Cap 390, the Air Passenger Services Charge Act, Cap 475, the Banking Act, Cap 488, the Central Bank Act, Cap 491, and the Tax Appeals Tribunal Act number 40 of the year 2013. Thereafter, members shall proceed to discuss a bill from their counterparts in the Senate, this Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 14 of the year 2018. And this one seeks to provide for additional conditional allocations to the county governments for the financial year 2018-2019. And therein there is the county allocation that is expected to be shared amongst these counties. It is 376,481,384,140 shillings. It is allocated into the county equitable share, which is 314 billion. There is additional conditional allocations, which is the national government share of revenue. That is 17,231,000,000. There is the allocation from the fuel levy fund, that is 15%, capped at 8,269,000,000, and conditional allocations emanating from loans and grants, and that is 36,900,000,000. One of the Constitution of Kenya, and changing the existing date for the general election for members of parliament, the president, member of the county assembly, the county governors and deputy county governors from the second Tuesday of August in every fifth year to the third Monday in the month of December in every fifth year. And the import of this is to introduce a date that is favorable to Kenyan circumstances, seeing that the month of August is usually quite busy with schools in session, and also majority of citizens still working, and that December is purely mostly reserved for holidays. Live proceedings brought to you courtesy of the Kenya Broadcasting Corporation in conjunction with the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit. My name is Vereso Mwanga. On behalf of the entire crew, I welcome you to follow the proceedings, and this morning they shall be presided over by the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Moses Cheboy. Good morning.
Of society and the just government of the people. We beseech you to behold with your abundant favor as your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to performance of important trust in this republic. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of our country, and of those whose interest you've committed to our charge. Amen. Honorable members, we seem to be just short of the required quorum. Therefore, I order that the bell be rung for 10 minutes.
A quorum hitch being experienced in the National Assembly this morning. A minimum 50 members required in order for business to be transacted. The Deputy Speaker, Honorable Moses Cheboy, has ordered the quorum bell to be rung. And this is to call upon members to come in and participate in the proceedings this morning. The Wednesday morning sitting, traditionally reserved for their bills and motions. And there is a proposal to have them discuss other matters this morning as well. There is the Finance Bill, National Assembly Bill number 20 of the year 2018 that is pending before the House. And there is also the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 14 of the year 2018. Also lined up, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment number 2 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 5 of the year 2018, sponsored by Kiminini Member of Parliament Chris Wamalwa. Our members are expected to deliberate on that. It seeks to change the dates of the general election from 2nd Tuesday of August in every 5th year to the 3rd Monday in the month of December every 5th year. The Honorable Anthony Tomoluoch, Member of Parliament Mathare constituency, has a motion that seeks declaration of youth unemployment as a national disaster and establishment of a national youth fund. And he argues that 75% of Kenya's population is under 35 years of age and that overall unemployment among the youth is at 55%. And that in view of the government's development agenda, the Big Four agenda, aimed at creating 1.3 million manufacturing jobs by the year 2022, and cognizant of the fact that Article 260 of the Constitution of Kenya and the Public Finance Management Act, the National Government Affirmative Action Fund, Regulations 2016, support affirmative action for the youth. And also noting that the Appropriation Act 2018 allocated a total sum of 7,352,220,651 shillings to the Youth Empowerment Program, then it is prudent that the government declares youth unemployment as a national disaster, and this will perhaps pave the way for establishment of a solid national youth fund of at least 5% of the national revenue collected each year. Honorable Charles Njagwa Kanyi, Member of Parliament Starehe, is expected to move his motion that seeks establishment of apprentice testing and certification centers in constituencies. And he bases his argument on the fact that the informal sector constitutes an important component of the economic activities and development of the country, representing about 82.7% of employment in Kenya, and that workers in the informal sector engage in commercial activities outside the realm of formal established mechanisms. And because there is no clear policy framework in place to regulate the operations by the government, then there is a need for this establishment of apprentice testing and certification centers. They will be discussing all that in addition to presenting any petitions, papers, giving notices of motion and statements in this live broadcast that is brought to you by KBC Channel 1 in collaboration with the Parliamentary Broadcasting Unit. You can also access this live broadcast via YouTube. It is streaming live there. You can also watch it on Signet, Bunge TV. And an audio version is available live on KBC Radio Taifa. A quorum achieved. We shall have confirmation from the Deputy Speaker.
Order members, order members. We now have the required quorum, and therefore business will begin.
Order number 1, administration of oath. Order number 2, communication from the chair. Order number 3, messages. Order number 4, petitions.
On this particular one, we have Honorable Innocent Momanyi. Member for Bobasi. You have the mic there? Okay, proceed.
Yeah, now I have. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On this petition, I'll donate about 2 minutes each to my neighboring constituency members of parliament.
Yeah. Honorable Momanyi, you know you are completely out of order. You have absolutely no power to donate any minute.
Okay. Thank you.
You go through your petition. And I will make a decision on whether to donate any minute.
Thank you. I, the undersigned, on behalf of residents of Nyamunema, in Getenga location, sub-location, Nyangiti location, Bas Church ward of Bobasi constituency, draw the attention of the House to the following. That a company by the name County 45 has been carrying out rock mining activities in Nyamunema village in Bobasi constituency since January 2018. That the chemical rock blasting has caused untold suffering to the residents as it is carried out next to the homes in a densely populated area without putting in place any measures to ensure safety of the residents who are exposed to the noise and chemical pollution, injuries occasioned by the activities. That, Mr. Speaker, several lives have been lost as a result of the blasting activities. That many residential houses, institutional buildings, and other valuable properties, among them Nyamunema SDA Church, Nyamunema Secondary School, and Nyamunema Primary School, have been damaged as a result of the blasting activities. That excavations coupled with the use of chemicals in the blasting of rock has led to serious environmental degradation in the area and negative health effects on residents. That the nearest water source, River Nyamabariri, which is the main source of water for the residents of Nyamunema, has been polluted and rendered unusable by the residents, by the said activities that are subjecting the residents to untold suffering. That efforts to address the matters raised in this petition with the relevant government agencies such as Ministry of Mining, Kisii County Commissioner's Office, and the National Environmental Management Authority, NEMA, have been in vain. That the issues in respect of which the petition is made are not pending before any court of law, constitutional or legal body. Therefore, your humble petitioners pray that the National Assembly, through the Departmental Committee on Environment and Natural Resources, investigate to establish how the company was licensed to operate without the due diligence to the environmental impact. Recommend forthwith the suspension of the mining activities by County 45 Company in this area and cancellation of the certificate of mining. Recommend that the Cabinet Secretary for the Ministry of Mining inquires into and determines the assessment and payment of compensation by the County 45 Company to victims of the company's mining activities for lives lost and property destroyed. Make any other orders or direction that it deems fit in the circumstances of this case, and your petitioners will ever pray. Thank you.
Very well. And members, I also want to ask that you be alive to the fact that last week you passed amendments to the standing order where you can now utilize also questions to make those kind of, you can still get maybe even better results. So, but I'll give maybe 2 or 3 members. We'll start with the Honorable Oyengo Osoro, member for South Mugrango.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join my colleague in support of the petition that is presented before this House, Mr. Speaker. And it's indeed true and quite saddening to note that several members of the public have really suffered out of the massive cracks that happened through the machinery that is being used in the very same quarry. Mr. Speaker, it's important to notify this House that some women have actually lost their pregnancies because this thing comes, the machines crack those rocks with a lot of weight and sound. And on a very sad note, some old woman, aged 93, lost her life immediately after that very fast bang hit the rock at a certain season. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member has really tried to use all relevant avenues, including negotiating with the owners of the company.
Honorable Osoro, be brief so that other members can also have, because you will still have enough time to, when I refer to the committee, you probably will give more details.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, most obliged. So I want to support the honorable member, and I wish that we can actually create an avenue that this matter should be put to rest once and for all, because people are suffering. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Let's have the member for Bamachoge Borabu, Honorable Ogutu Abel.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me a chance to make remarks on this petition. Mr. Speaker, I want to appreciate that the matter that has been petitioned this morning is a very serious matter to the local communities that are affected, and specifically the efforts that have been made to ensure that this matter is addressed having been fruitless. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that the authority called NEMA has seen this country undergo a lot of costly consequences upon approval of most of the projects that are to be implemented. The Speaker, as this matter is being discussed by the respective committee, I recommend that the institution called NEMA should also be seriously interrogated to find out why it takes too long to respond to some of the consequences that follow after the approval of specific projects. I support this petition. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Is that also the women rep for Nyamira who wants to speak to this one? Honorable Jerusha Mamanyi. I'm trying to locate you. Your card seems not to be working.
Yeah. Come here.
Use the one which your colleague was using.
Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you so much. This is Jerusha Mumanya, as you said, Women Rep Nyamira. I also want to support this petition. Indeed, our people are really suffering from the constituency where Mr. Obiru comes from, and we have heard the cry. The women have been affected. Recently, very many people died because there was a collapse of the hole where they were digging. So we are asking for this House, through the relevant committee, to ventilate and come out with solutions which are going to assist our people, because we have seen how much havoc this mining is going to cause. So, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Honorable Tongi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak onto this motion. From the onset, I support the motion, which has been brought forth by my neighbor, Honorable Biri. Mr. Speaker, the people on the ground have suffered and have suffered heavily. We have had a chance of witnessing, Mr. Speaker, and Honorable Biri is on record of trying to resolve the issue in a more amicable way. Actually, he was arrested and detained over the weekend in jail, in police cells, because he was articulating the issues which brought him to Parliament of his people. We are so concerned as a community. We appreciate that the people there are making it a business, but it can be done in a more scientific way. Nowadays, there's technology which can be used, which is less harmful, and we are encouraging that the business person involved, if we can use a more modern technology to harvest the stones instead of using the old style of doing things, because now the population is high, the place is highly populated, and therefore it's risky for the community, for them to do the harvesting the way they're doing it now. We encourage that if they can use more modern technology, Mr. Speaker, we have no issue with that, but as using the old technology they're using now is not helping the community and it's more dangerous. I support, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Okay, maybe to give a more national outlook to that particular petition, I probably will give Honorable Gikaria, who is abnormally well dressed this morning.
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much. I'm always like this these days. Honorable Speaker, I arise to support the petition. And this is happening. Honorable Speaker, particularly the NEMA people. These are the people who are supposed to be licensing and giving an okay for that kind of business to continue. And I think NEMA are sleeping. Not only is it happening in Kisii, even in Nakuru, just behind the Menengai crater, it is happening. And when you're saying women are suffering, people take it lightly. So I think it is important that the committee, once they start looking into that, NEMA should be brought on board and be told to do their work as they should. I totally support the petition, Honorable Speaker.
Now, okay, so that marks the end of it. So we proceed to the next order.
Order number 5, papers.
Okay, let's start with the Chairperson, Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning. Represented by the Vice Chair. Yes, proceed. It's difficult to locate you. Yeah, proceed now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Wednesday, August 29th, 2018. A report of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning on the vetting of nominees for appointment to the positions of chairperson and members of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, SRC. This is a chairperson Departmental Committee of Finance and National Planning.
Now let's go to the Chairperson, Budget and Appropriation Committee.
Thank you. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the House today.
Order. Honorable Sankok, consult quietly. Honorable Sankok, proceed.
Thank you for the protection from the Honorable Sankok, Honorable Speaker. I actually thought it was a sergeant at arms seated, standing behind when I turned, but his mode of dressing. Honorable Speaker, I beg to lay the following papers on the table of the House today, Wednesday, August 29th, 2018, report of the Budget and Appropriations Committee on its review of the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 14 of 2018. Thank you.
Okay. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Honorable Ashiali.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to give notice of motion that are aware that buildings in more than 100 government secondary schools in the country have been torched this year, with many of the arson incidents being blamed on students. Further aware that the learning in many schools, in these schools, have been severely interfered with, thus affecting the learning timetable, noting that the number of students arrested for allegedly burning or conspiring to burn school buildings around the country now stands at over 150. Cognizant that students are aged below 18 and are thus juvenile offenders, further cognizant that Article 53(1)(f) of the Constitution provides that every child has the right not to be detained except as a measure of last resort, and when detained, to be held for the shortest appropriate period of time and separate from adults, and in conditions that take account child's sex and age. Appreciating that Section 18(2) of the Child's Act provides that a child offender shall be separated from adults in custody. Further appreciating that the Children Act 2001 advances the protection of children from any action deemed hazardous or likely to interfere with the child's education or to be harmful to the child's health or physical, mental, spiritual, moral, or social development. Deeply concerned that the delinquency trends tend to lead to adult crime and thereby lifelong criminal career if not managed appropriately. This House resolves that the national government puts in place administrative measures to ensure that child offenders are not remanded or incarcerated in adults' remand, and strengthens the existing rehabilitation schools in the country as a measure to ensure delinquent adolescents are effectively rehabilitated while making accountable for the crimes committed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Let's have therefore the Vice Chair, Finance, Honorable Ndirangu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Notice of motion. I wish to give notice of the following motion, Mr. Speaker, that taking into consideration the findings of the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning in their report on the vetting of the nominees for approval as chairperson and members of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission, laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, August 29, 2018, and pursuant to the provisions of Article 250, 2B, and Section 7(11) of the Salaries and Remuneration Commission Act. This House approves the appointment of the following to the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. 1, Mrs. Lynn Sherop Megish as chairperson. Members, Dr. Rea Mubua Monyao, nominated by the Teachers Service Commission. 2, Honorable Harima Abdire Mohammed, nominated by the Parliamentary Service Commission. 3, Mr. John Kennedy Monyonsho, nominated by the Defense Council. Dr. Amani Yuda Komora, nominated by the Abrera body representing employees. Certified Public Accountant Sophie Moturi, nominated by the Joint Forum of Professional Bodies. And Mrs. Margaret Sawe, nominated by the Senate on behalf of the county government. And Honorable Ambassador Dalmas Otieno Onyango, nominated by the Public Service Commission, and rejects the appointment of Ms. Neri Peris Ashubwe, a nominee of the umbrella body representing trade unions, to the Salaries and Remuneration Commission. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order, order, honorable members. Order, Honorable Sankok. Honorable Sankok, order. Order, members. Order, order. What the vice chair is doing is simply moving a notice of motion. Is actually giving notice. Now you will have an opportunity to discuss and debate and make your decision. Now when people like Honorable Sankok here make unnecessary interjection. Order, Honorable Sankok. Honorable Vice Chair, did you finalize your notice?
I did, Mr. Speaker.
I think you did. Yes, so the members can wait and make their and debate and make their decision. Next order. Now you don't have to tell us what you are going to do. You will have the right to do it. Proceed.
Order number 7, statements.
Next order.
Order number 8, procedural motion, exemption of business from the provisions of Standing Order 40, subclause 3.
Yes, Honorable Leader of Majority Party. Is it going to be Honorable Washiali? Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of Majority Leader and the House Business, I move that this House orders that the business appearing in order number 9 and 10 be exempted from the provisions of Standing Order 43, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or minority party or business sponsored by a committee. Mr. Speaker, this is actually a very straightforward motion, Mr. Speaker, and I want to beg members to pay attention because this is a decision that we are going to make as a House, that usually Wednesday mornings are for private members' motions, but we have requested the House to accept for us to put a question on order number 9, which was adequately debated yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and because we want to go on recess after we have finished the third reading, we have requested the House to accept that we pass this procedural motion so that we can put the question this morning, and in the afternoon we can go for the third reading, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, under order number 10, it's actually a budgetary issue, Mr. Speaker, and this is actually a bill that if this House approved, it will go ahead and go to the Senate for further approval so that the allocation, the division of revenue bill that had already been passed is amended so that the budget can proceed. Mr. Speaker, this is a very small bill. This is a very, very small bill. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, this is a very small bill, and we don't expect this to even take more than 30 minutes because it's just a matter of...
Which bill are you talking about, Honorable Ashiali? Which bill?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the procedural motion?
I was just justifying, Mr. Speaker. It's just that members are consulting a bit loudly.
Yes.
But actually, I would have finished. Mr. Speaker.
I can see a few members to my right who are consulting Honorable Sankok and others here. Okay.
Yeah.
And this other side, I also see Honorable, is that Honorable Gladys Wanga? Yes, please, resume your seat.
Therefore, Mr. Speaker, if members agree with us on this procedural motion, it should not take more than 1 hour of their private members' business. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and ask the majority leader to second.
Very well.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, Honorable Wanga and Honorable Kolosh, I think they have an interest in the matter which is coming in the afternoon. But I really want to ask members to pick the report and read and see the reasons why some people have been approved and some have been rejected. Then from there we can engage the House. But Mr. Speaker, I think what the majority whip have said, this was decided in the House Business Committee, that because we only have today and tomorrow as per our calendar, and in agreement with all of what we do when the House is coming for a long recess of a month, we agreed to finish the business that are important to the House. And one of them is the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 14 of 2018, and of course the Finance Bill where we'll put the question. So that the conditional grant provided for in the bill, in the Senate bill, will be approved by this House, as the Senate has already approved, so that our counties can access that money. So we're only asking that the first 1 hour, it can even take 45 minutes, we deal with the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 14 of 2018, so that by afternoon or tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon, we deal with the committee of the whole House of this bill so that our counties can access mainly the donor-funded conditional grant as provided. So I beg to move. I beg to second.
Very well. Obviously, the majority leader is used to moving, not seconding. That's why. So I will propose a question. I'll propose a question which is that the House orders that the business appearing as order number 9 and 10 be exempted from the provision of Standing Order 43, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or minority party, or business sponsored by a committee. I put the question, which is that these House orders that the business appearing as order number 9 and 10 be exempted from provisions of Standing Order 43, being a Wednesday morning, a day allocated for business not sponsored by the majority or minority party, or business sponsored by a committee. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of our contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
Order number 9, the Finance Bill, National Assembly Bill number 20 of 2018. Second reading, question to be put.
Order members, having confirmed that we have the required numbers to transact this business, I put the question, which is that the Finance Bill, National Assembly Bill number 20 of 2018, be read a second time. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it.
A bill for an act of parliament to amend the law relating to various taxes and duties and for matters incidental thereto. Order number 10, the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 14 of 2018, second reading.
Okay, Leader Majority Party.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Division of Revenue Bill, Revenue Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 14 of 2018, be read a second time. Mr. Speaker, this bill proposes to amend the Division of Revenue Bill, the Division of Revenue Act number 1 of 2018, with only one aim, and that aim and objective is to introduce 3 more conditional allocations for county governments for the financial year 2018-2019 to be financed by loans and grants from donors. Mr. Speaker, the amendment arose as the proposal for these additional resources, additional allocations, had been received by the National Treasury for the, it was received by the time when the Division of Revenue Act 2018 was already enacted. So because the law was already in place and the donors engaged the National Treasury at a later date, it is important that both the Senate, which originated this bill, and the National Assembly to do this amendment so that we factor in the 3 different additional allocations from donors as additional grants to be used by our counties. And Mr. Speaker, the first conditional grant amounts to 1 billion and is to be financed by the government of Sweden for the agriculture sector development support program 2. This program, Mr. Speaker, is part of the implementation strategy of the agricultural policy for both levels of government, and it is geared towards facilitating the commercialization of agriculture-based enterprises. And this will transform our food security, it will transform livestock and fishery in terms of production. Mr. Speaker, this program will be implemented by the national government. State Department for Crop Production, and will benefit all the 47 counties, with the top beneficiaries being Turkana, Wajir, and Mandera counties. So, Speaker, if you look at the bill, I'm sure members have, a breakdown of the county allocations has been provided in Annex 1 of the bill. The second, the Speaker, can you talk to Honorable Rehema and Wanga that if they have other business to do outside what I'm saying?
Order members. Let's consult in relatively lower tones now. Honorable Wanga is all over. I really do not know what she's really up to, but whatever it is, it can wait for, you know.
So, Mr. Speaker, the first conditional grant is out of 1 billion from the Swedish government. The second conditional grant, Mr. Speaker, is valued at 880 million shillings and is funded by the European Union for the water tower protection and climate change in terms of mitigation and adaptation programs. And this program, Mr. Speaker, is aimed at facilitating the implementation of the National Climate Change Action Plan, which this House passed in the 11th Parliament, and of course the master plan for the conservation of our catchment areas. This program, Mr. Speaker, will be implemented again by the national government, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and will benefit 11 counties, with each county receiving 80 million shilling, as indicated in the Annex 2 of the bill. Mr. Speaker, the third and the last conditional grant is worth 1.85 billion and is to be financed by the International Development Agency, a subsidiary of the World Bank, and is geared towards the establishment and operations of the urban institutional arrangements such as the charters, the boards, the administration, and for the initial preparation of the urban infrastructure investment. So it's mainly about our urban cities in terms of how to upgrade their infrastructure investments. This program, Mr. Speaker, again will benefit 45 counties, excluding Nairobi and Mombasa, with each county receiving 41.2 million as indicated in the Annex 3 of the bill. And this program, Mr. Speaker, will be implemented and undertaken by the national government's State Department of Housing and Urban Development. Mr. Speaker, I wish to note that the agreement for conditional loans and grants to county governments should be aligned to the Kenyan budget process. And that is why we are aligning it within the Division of Revenue Bill. So this program must be aligned to the budget process. These are donor money, and I am sure the chair of the Budget and Appropriation Committee of the House has tabled the report of his committee. 2, that a framework for assessing the performance of this conditional allocation from loans and grants for effective oversight must be developed by the National Treasury in consultation with the various implementing ministries, departments, and agencies. And the Speaker, donor-funded money must also be used to the best of the people of Kenya and intended purpose, and I'm sure the national government will provide an effective oversight of these programs in consultation or collaboration with the line ministries. So, Mr. Speaker, I really want to urge the House that the amendment we are doing to the Division of Revenue Act 2018 is just to factor in the 3 main conditional loans and grants from donors that will benefit our county governments, the one from the government of Sweden on the Agricultural Sector Development Support Program 2, the one from the World Bank, subsidiary International Development Assistance, which I mean the World Bank will give department, and the last one is the one from the European Union on the support they're giving to the water towers, protection and climate change in terms of mitigation and adaptation program. All these programs will be managed by the national government in its various ministries, state departments. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move and ask the chair of the Budget and Appropriation Committee and member for Kikuyu constituency, Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, to second.
Honorable Ichung'wah.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, and I beg to second this bill. And as the Leader of Majority has articulated well, that this amendment bill emanated from conditional grants and loans from donors that were not available by the time we were doing the division of revenue bill earlier this year, and therefore they are not gotten to Treasury, and that's why it was necessary for our Senate to amend this again to be in line with the county allocation of revenue bill that we passed again in this year, earlier this year. Honorable Speaker, I don't know what is happening in this House this morning. The consultations are too loud.
There is a lot of excitement which I also cannot be able to pinpoint the reason. But all the members allow Honorable Ichung'wah to second this particular bill in peace. Proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for your protection.
And ignore the decibels now, because I think there is little.
Although the member for Dagoretti South, Honorable KJ Kiarie, tells me it is what was famously referred to as closing day excitement. Since the House is expected to be going on recess tomorrow, maybe especially many of the new members are excited, are suffering from this closing day excitement, Honorable Speaker. But back to business, Honorable Speaker. As the Leader of Majority pointed out, the conditional grants are 3, 1 billion shillings being a grant from Sweden for the Agricultural Sector Development and Support Program. And the program, as was said, is part of the implementation strategy of the agricultural policy for both levels of government, that is the national government and the county governments, to facilitate commercialization of agricultural-based enterprises by transforming food, livestock, and fishery production. And as members will realize from the Annex 1, this money is going to all the 47 counties, including the county of Nairobi, which, Honorable Speaker, I don't know which parts of Nairobi is in agricultural production, but it is benefiting to the tune of about 21.9, almost 22 million shillings. The second conditional grant, Honorable Speaker, from the European Union for the water tower protection and climate change mitigation and adaptation program. This again goes to about 11 counties, among them being Bungoma, Busia, Elgeyo Marakwet, Kakamega, Kisumu, Nandi, Siaya, Tana River, Trans Nzoia, Uasin Gishu, and Vihiga counties, each getting 80 million shillings to make the total of 880 million shillings. The last conditional grant of 1.85 billion is to be financed by the International Development Assistance, a program of the World Bank, and is geared towards the establishment and operationalization of urban institutional arrangements, such as charters, boards, administrations, and for the initial preparation for urban infrastructure investments. This program, as was articulated by the Leader of Majority, covers 45 counties, with the exception of Nairobi and Mombasa counties, with each county receiving a total of 41.2 million shillings. Honorable Speaker, I think it's important for members because this grant, Honorable Speaker.
What is it, Honorable Raso?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on what the chairman budget is presenting. We have a 2-page report for the members, and yet he's reading a very detailed report. Mr. Speaker, is it not in order for him to supply the House with more copies of the report that he is presenting to the House? Thank you.
I thought, Honorable Raso, that should be picked from the table office.
No, it's not there.
Isn't it not there? What is the position, Honorable?
Honorable Speaker, I think Honorable Rasu is well guided. Being a seasoned member in this House, it is definitely not the chairman's work to supply the House with reports. My work is simply to table a copy of the report which is tabled, and it has annexures. I think what has happened is that maybe the copy Honorable Rasu has, or what has been supplied from the clerk's office, doesn't have annexures.
You see, Honorable Ishungwa, much as I, of course, sympathize with your position, you are not the one who does that. But I'm really inclined to go with Honorable Raso, because when you see our Honorable member who is really interested in getting into details, I think they surely deserve to have it. Now, what we should know is whether we put it in the table office, and that should be available for members. If that is the position, I would be happy.
The report is actually in the table office, okay. Honorable Speaker.
So,
and therefore, I would be very happy to share a copy of this.
Yes.
As soon as I'm done. Actually, I can pass it over to him because.
Very good. That will be very good, because for a member who is willing to go to the details, I think it is something that is worth.
It is. I completely concur. Unlike many of the members who are loudly consulting,
yes,
and even not aware of what is happening in the House, Honorable Speaker. And that is why I was pointing out to that particular conditional grant of 41.2 million shillings that is going to all counties for the urban infrastructure development. And that particular grant is to help each of the counties to establish charters and boards. And indeed, Honorable Speaker, I can report in my county in Kiambu, I have seen this happening.
Again. What is it, Honorable Simba Arati, member for Dagoretti North? What is it?
He doesn't know what is going on.
Mr. Speaker,
next time you really don't need to put your hand up. I can see your name perfectly from here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is it in order for the chairman to say that he can give his copy to Honorable Raso, whereas Mr. Raso has just asked that that report be provided for the House? Mr. Speaker, we must be wary of the chairman. His way of doing things in this House chair is wanting. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I would request...
I am not sure I agree with you at all. This is one of the very hard-working members of the House.
Well agreeing, Mr. Speaker.
If what you are doing is casting aspersion, you know you need to really go through the normal rigors of discussing a colleague member. Right. But anyway, what is the issue that you have specifically? You've asked for the copy of the document?
No, Mr. Speaker, what the chairman is saying is that he's going to provide Honorable Raso with the copy, whereas it's the House which wants that copy, not Honorable Raso.
Well, that document was tabled, Honorable Arati. It was tabled, and probably you need to go to the table office and you will have your copy. But what is it, Honorable Leader of Majority Party?
Mr. Speaker, you know, Honorable Arati has not recovered from the sugar crisis and the mercury. And he is yet to come back to the House. The report on this bill has been tabled long time ago. Honorable Arati can go to room 7, table room. He can pick a copy. And Mr. Speaker, it is as clear as day and night. We are amending the Revenue Act of 2018 to put it in law, the 3 conditional loans granted on agriculture, on climate change, and on infrastructure investment. Mr. Speaker, we cannot force members to get a copy and read for them. And if that Honorable Arati is expecting, then that's only done in county assemblies. It's not done in the National Assembly.
Honorable Speaker.
Let's sweep this under the table and proceed.
Honorable Speaker, I appreciate the protection from the chair and the support from the leader of majority. You know, if I had the opportunity to cut away these copies of this report in a wheelbarrow to the chamber, Honorable Speaker, I would have done that, and probably that is what Honorable Arati confuses in his former life, where he would cut a lot of cabbages and kales to Kawangware market. He expects that in this house, we have the opportunity to do the same.
I think there's a problem there. What is it, Honorable Arati? Now that you have, unfortunately...
Now that, Mr. Speaker, the cabbage and the sumawiki has come on the floor of the House, is it in order for the chairman, whom we know, that he has been hiding important information, even including the budget making?
No.
For him, Mr. Speaker, to allude in this floor of the House.
No, I'm not going to allow you. I think, honorable members, what we are, I think we are now going the wrong direction. So, honorable members, please, we are getting very personal and it is unnecessary. Just wind down, finalize your secondment, and then we finalize this thing. Yes.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for that protection from the Honorable Simba Arati. Honorable Speaker, I was saying it is important that members do note that the 41.2 million shillings going to each county out of the 1.854 billion shillings conditional grant on the World Bank program for Kenya Urban Support Projects, urban infrastructure conditional grants. Honorable Speaker, I was saying I have had the occasion to witness the establishment of what they are now calling municipality boards in my own county in Kiambu. And what members need probably to guide their members of county assemblies and also the public, because it's very important. These municipality boards, Honorable Speaker, are boards that will be charged with oversighting and the implementation of a lot of money coming from the World Bank. But what I've seen in some of these counties, Honorable Speaker, is governors going out of their way to get their cronies and friends into boards, people who have no capacity at all, and with complete disregard of the Constitution, no provisions on public participation. And therefore, it's important, even as we go on recess, Honorable Speaker, to encourage members to be able to follow up with each of their county governments, how these boards are being established, what caliber of people are being put into these municipality boards, Honorable Speaker. Because this 41.2 million shillings is geared to go and train those boards and help establish those boards, which will later be charged with the onerous task of implementing development projects on infrastructure development within those municipalities. And Honorable Speaker, it is important that we, as much as this is a devolved function, we take the responsibility to also help in oversighting and educating the public on the importance of these municipality boards, charters, and administrations that will be set up using these conditional grants. With that, Honorable Speaker, I beg to second this motion and urge members to support. Thank you.
Before I propose a question, let me recognize in the Speaker's gallery, Ruaitira Primary School from Gatanga constituency of Murang'a County. Order. Order. I propose a question which is at the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill, Senate Bill number 14 of 2018, be now read a second time. Honorable Sheikh, you want to speak? You want to speak to this one?
Do you mind to put me a few, just after one speaker or two?
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, sorry.
So let me see somebody
I
from
got myself
the
held up.
minority who can be able to. I see that Honorable Dr. Wamalwa has been missing in action for some time. I am told he was receiving the eternal blessings.
Yes, Mr.
So
Speaker.
can you proceed and share it with the House?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Indeed, I was away, and I had spoken about the matter yesterday because I was in the Holy City of Vatican. And we had an opportunity to meet the Holy Father, Pope Francis, and he's praying for Kenya. So I bring greetings and the blessings from the Holy City of Vatican. Mr. Speaker, this motion is very critical on the division of revenue. And obviously, the objective of the division of revenue is actually to divide the national revenue between the two levels of government. That is the national government and the county government. And it's, of course, we must look for issue of concurrence. And on a motion like this, Mr. Speaker, maybe for the new members, it's not just the division of revenue. We only speak on the aspect that we are seeking concurrence. And in this case, it's the conditional grant, the big grants that the leader of majority has spoken about it, and also the chairman of budget committee has spoken about it. Mr. Speaker, quickly, I want to speak about the first grant. This is the money that is coming from the Swedish government. We are being told of 1 billion that is going to go towards the food security, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the backbone of the economy of this country is agriculture. And when you look at the Maputo Declaration, Mr. Speaker, which talks about the 10% allocation on food security, this country, Mr. Speaker, has never, at any given time, even allocated even 5% of the national revenue on food security as per the Maputo Declaration, whereby Kenya is a signatory. Mr. Speaker, the 1 billion we are talking about is going to add a lot of value, particularly on food security, which is one of the agendas of the Jubilee government that we are talking about. And food security, Mr. Speaker, is very, very critical. But what we are saying, as this money is going to be utilized, the level of corruption when it comes to matters of food security, Mr. Speaker, is wide. Food security, it's across the entire value chain, Mr. Speaker. When you talk of the issues of fertilizer in this country, Mr. Speaker, the government has gone to an extent of saying they are bringing subsidized fertilizers to the farmers. The great farmers, Mr. Speaker, of Trans Nzoia County, great farmers have not even been paid right now the maize is supplies to the National Cereals and Produce Board, just because of the unscrupulous business people who went and got the maize from somewhere, sourced cheaply, and supplies to Cereals Board, whereby they colluded with the accountants. They were paid, and the poor farmer who had supplied this maize up to now, Mr. Speaker, has not yet been paid. So we want to thank the Swedish government, but we are calling upon the national government is going to implement this to ensure that those people with corrupt practices, Mr. Speaker, they should be able to stop. We are seeing the crack of this man, Nordin. You know, Nordin, when he came here, Mr. Speaker, we thought, this is a man, but we are seeing the arrests that are going around, Mr. Speaker. The senior people in the government are getting worried, Mr. Speaker. You know you are equivalent in the judiciary. You know what has happened? I'm praying that they don't come for you, Mr. Speaker, because he's targeting the high ends.
You are completely out of order. But proceed.
On a light touch, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I move on now, I go to the European Union on the 800 million that is going to go towards the water tower and the climate change. Mr. Speaker, we are aware we have a lot of changes as far as the climate is concerned, and we are talking of things to do with afforestation, for instance. We are told we should have 10% of the coverage should be under forest. In this country, Mr. Speaker, we are told we have 3%. So there's so much that we need to do to correct the climate change. In traditional days, Mr. Speaker, our great-fathers or grandfathers used to prepare their farms. They know rains will come at specific months. But nowadays, Mr. Speaker, because of climate change, the trends have changed. So it is indeed important that this 880 million, it's going to add a lot of value as far as the issues of climate change are concerned, Mr. Speaker. And we do know very well that when it comes to water catchment, it is very critical because it contributes towards the food security. Right now, we are having issues with the Mau, the Mau forest. All these are catchment areas that they must be protected. Mr. Speaker, lastly, I want to talk about the 1.85 billion. This that is coming from the Investment Development Agency, which is a program of the World Bank. And this is supposed to go to the urban areas for purposes of the boards, administration, and administration etc. Mr. Speaker, the management of our cities is very critical. There are some cities, when you go to those cities, Mr. Speaker, the planning is not there. We know very well that it says failing to plan is planning to fail. So it is important that this money, if it goes to the boards of those respective cities, those boards must be put in place. The planning aspects must be able to be implemented. When you go to some counties, Mr. Speaker, even some cities or some towns, up to now, they don't have the boards. So it is important the county government, wherever they are, they must be able to move with speed so that the respective towns can have the boards in place. These boards can help in management. It can help in planning the town so that there's that easy accessibility. These issues of traffic jams, Mr. Speaker, it is because of the poor planning. We need to have the master plans in place, and this is a simple issue that we should not waste so much time on it, Mr. Speaker, because we are actually touching on the issues that they are seeking concurrence. We don't have to open the entire bill of the Division of Revenue. I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support.
Okay, let's have Honorable Gashimu Githinji.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for that opportunity to contribute to this Division of Revenue Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, if you look at Annex 1, you'd see that this condition of grant looks at actually allocates money in all the 47 counties in terms of improvement of agriculture, which is one of the main pillars or agendas of the government, the Jubilee government. And further, Annex 2, you look at there is establishment or actually a conditional grant for improvement of and protection of the water towers and climate change, which has been a major issue in Kenya. However, when I look at that annexure, though I also support that conditional grant, it does not touch on the main water towers in this country, like Mount Kenya and Aberdares, which are the main water towers in this country. Actually, Nairobi depends on water from Aberdares, and we have not seen any allocation for protection of water tower in Aberdares. We have also seen that the lower parts of the country depend on water from Mount Kenya region. Kirinyaga is one of the areas that we have rivers flowing from Mount Kenya, but we have not seen any allocation for protection of those water towers in those areas, the mountain areas. But going forward, I believe there is a consideration that needs to be made by the Budget and Appropriation Committee when they are looking at the areas where they need to allocate these funds for protection of the water towers and climate change. Further, I would appreciate the Budget Committee for actually making sure that each and every county gets money for urban infrastructure. That is 41,200,000. I would actually look at my own constituency, whereby we have a constituency headquarters which has no tarmac, and actually is also lagging behind in terms of street lighting. I believe when the county governments and especially my county, get this allocation, we'll also try and balance the urban centers within each and every constituency to make sure that there is allocation of resources to improve those urban centers within all the constituencies within the county. So it is a good, it's a job well done, and I believe in terms of supporting the government in achieving its Big Four agenda, agriculture and water are key players for food production, and also we expect that this money will also trickle and help the Mwananchi, the Wanjiko, and without any corruption being witnessed within the counties. So we expect, as we approve this, these conditional grants, that these conditional grants are actually not even supposed to meet the recurrent or any other expenditures extraneous from what has already been proposed. And we expect also the Senate to use its mandate in oversight of the county, the county governments and the county assemblies to also play their role, not to be part of the county governments in terms of utilization, but be part of the county government in terms of proper oversight and utilization of these funds. So, Mr. Speaker, I beg to support.
Very well. Let's have Honorable Martin Owino, member for Ndiwa.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity that you have given me to support the division of Revenue Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the people of Sweden and also EU and the World Bank. Conditional grants, Mr. Speaker, comes from the taxpayers' money, and I think we should take this very seriously. We have had occasions where funds have been misappropriated, and that's very unfortunate, Mr. Speaker. Talking about agriculture, my constituency in Ndewa is one of the agricultural constituency. And I pray, Mr. Speaker, that before this money is released, we should have a structure that is well outlined how this money will reach constituencies after they have hit the county. And also, Mr. Speaker, I would request that in making those structure, this disbursement should not land into the consolidated accounts of the counties, because we have known what happens there when all the monies come together. I would like to see separate accounts set and ways of disbursement done. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I'm talking about this is that...
What is it, Honorable Bayaya?
Mr. Speaker, rising on Standing Order 95, I think this matter has been explained and the issues, and I think members are in agreement. And looking at the mood of the House, I think it's important we move to the next order, because I think this is well done up to this point.
Okay, I hear you. I get what you are saying. I think being a private member, you are saying that you really do not want this government business to take too long. You want to get back to private members' business. But I will allow Honorable Member for Ndiwa to finalize, and then you will make your decision, Honorable Members.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think this is very important, even if we have to get back to the members' private business. But I will be fair. The grant that is being given to the counties, Mr. Speaker, as I said, we are now approving it, and we don't want to stay aloof after that approval. That when you get to the counties, you look irrelevant because these functions are devolved. There should be a structure where MPs also can provide some oversight so that we stay loop onto what is going on there. Mr. Speaker, EU, in its kindness, I think need to be also patted at the back for conservation and environmental issues. And I hope this will go to appropriate center. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, the issue of boards. The boards are ineffective from the word go because they are selected not on competency, but on favors. And I think we should be very serious on this, how this is going to be done. I'm just guessing that the World Bank is concerned about the management of these funds or other funds. That is why they want to strengthen the infrastructure so that when money is released, there is a capacity to do oversight and also to give guidance how these monies can be used. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this with the reservation that I don't know who is responsible, whether it's the budget committee or these things should be itemized and the structure should be very clear, and the role of members of parliament in providing additional oversight to this fund should be very clear. Otherwise, we are not just here to approve and then we don't know what happens to these funds. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support.
Very well. I therefore dispose Honorable Ya's request, which is that the mover be called upon to reply. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Many as of a contrary opinion say nay? No. The ayes have it. Well, is there anybody who is challenging that particular decision? Yes. Challenge it in the normal manner. The 7 of you are absolutely short of the required numbers. Proceed. Proceed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. As much as I cannot donate, I would have wanted to donate a minute to Honorable Makali Mulu.
You are absolutely going to be out of order. And the standing orders are very clear.
Honorable Speaker, that's why I said as much as I can't. I was just appreciating the eagerness of the Honorable Makali Mulu and the indomitable Pukose.
Yes, but Honorable Dr. Makali Mulu, I do understand. What is it, Honorable Makali Mulu? What is it, Honorable Makali Mulu?
You know, Mr. Speaker, many times you have said in this House, for us to improve debate, we need to research. And it becomes very frustrating you research on an item, and just by a statement like what Honorable said, because we can also say and we close this House now, but we don't want to go that way, Mr. Speaker. I think it's important when people research, they are given opportunity to present their points. Mr. Speaker, on a serious note, I plead with you. And there are things which have not been said, which I researched and I wanted to say. If you give me a chance, I will say things which have not been said by anybody here in this House. Because we research on
what is this specifically that has not been said?
Can you allow me?
No, just say what is it that you have
No, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker,
no, I'm not allowing you to contribute. Just say what you have
Two things
has said.
Two things I think we have not said.
So that I see whether really...
Yeah, the first thing, Mr. Speaker, the reason why we are doing this amendment is because these additional grants came after we have gone through our budget cycle. Which times, in terms of timing, I think we need to urge our development partners at the government to do their signing of agreements in time so that we align these agreements with the budget cycle. Who has said that?
Yes, nobody has said that. Proceed.
The other point, Mr. Speaker,
yes.
The issue is, even after releasing this money because it goes to the county governments, we need to have a framework to monitor implementation of these things at the county assembly level and at the Senate level. True. Who has said that?
Yes. Now, thank you very much. Thank you. The two things that have not been said, you have actually said them. So let us proceed now and wind the debate. Now, because the decision has been made by members, I have no power to revisit it.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
There cannot be anything medical, Honorable Pukose, on this particular one. Proceed, Honorable Member for Kikuyu.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. There is surely nothing medical. And I'm glad at least the Honorable Makali Mulu has been able to point out those 2 points that had not been mentioned by anybody, which are very important points, Honorable Speaker, because in reply, if we don't tie all the agreements for grants and loans that we need before the budget process begins, then every year, it means every year we'll have to come back with these sort of amendments. And Honorable Speaker, I just want to thank the few members who have contributed to this amendment bill. And as I said, it's very important to ensure that is also in our division of revenue bill is in line with the County Allocations Act that was passed earlier this year by the Senate and agreed with by this National Assembly. Honorable Speaker, with that, I don't need to belabor anything else that has not been covered, and I thank members for their contribution, and I beg to reply. There is nothing out of order. There's nothing out of order.
What is it again, Honorable Kosgei? What is it?
Mr. Speaker, just like Mheshimiwa Makao Mulu, this issue is so important, and there are issues that you didn't allow us to ventilate, Mr. Speaker. The Mau water tower is the biggest water tower we are talking about in the country now.
Okay. Okay, it's water under the bridge, Honorable Kosgei, but you've been heard anyway. Let's have Honorable Bayer. What is it again?
Mr. Speaker, I rise on Standing Order 53. I think we do not have the requisite numbers to put the question, and therefore I ask that we defer the putting of the question and at Standing Order 53.
That's completely in order, so let's proceed. You are granted, and that is it. Next order. But what is it again, Honorable Member for Kipkelion? What? Okay. Well, proceed. Unfortunately, I didn't hear Honorable Hillary. I didn't hear you. Is it that you really wanted to contribute, Honorable Hillary?
Issue of quorum.
Okay, and fortunately or unfortunately, my hands are fairly tied on that one, so therefore, I'll have to look at the stock of members who are in the House. And just because even on the face of it, when Honorable Bayer raised this issue, he actually mentioned the same thing. So I order the bell to be rung for 10 minutes. And nobody, including Honorable Hillary Kosgei, will walk out. Nobody, not even Honorable Nyamai. Nobody will walk out. Nobody will. Yes. So the 10 minutes, the bell be rung for 10 minutes?
Order, honorable members. We now have quorum. We shall proceed. Next order.
Order number 11, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment number 2 Bill, National Assembly Bill number 5 of 2018, second reading.
Yes, Honorable Chris Wamalwa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to move this bill, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill number 2 of 2018. Mr. Speaker, this bill, it is aimed to change the elections date. Actually, that's the key objective of this bill, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Chris Wamarwa, please move for the second reading.
Noise. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move this Constitution Amendment Bill for the second reading, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the principal objective of this bill is to amend Articles 101, Sub-Article 1, Article 136, Sub-Article 2A, Article 177, Sub-Article 1A, and Article 180, Sub-Article 1 of the Constitution of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, by changing the existing date for the general election for the members of Parliament, the President, Deputy President, member of the County Assembly, and the county governors and deputy governors from the second Tuesday of August in every fifth year of the third Monday in December in every fifth year, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the bill seeks to introduce a new date for conducting a general election that will be more favorable to Kenya's circumstances, Mr. Speaker. The amendment is to ensure that the date of elections, Mr. Speaker, reflects the unique circumstances and tradition of Kenya. The current date for general election, Mr. Speaker, unduly disrupts the education calendar, and most importantly, the conduct of the national examinations of the case of either fresh or a runoff of any invalidation of the presidential election. Also, the tradition of reading the budget, Mr. Speaker, concurrently in the East Africa has been disrupted by the current election date. As you are aware, Mr. Speaker, we have an arrangement between the East African countries where there is, to avoid speculation, normally the budget date is supposed to be read on the same day. But unfortunately, because of the circumstances, this was interfered, Mr. Speaker. The amendment seeks to restore the tourism season, Mr. Speaker, because we normally have a high tourist season when it comes to the month of August, Mr. Speaker, and tourism plays a very critical role to the economy of this country. And tourists normally, Mr. Speaker, they fear because of maybe elections during the violence during the electioneering time, they don't come, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill is not coming for the first time. Mr. Speaker, this bill came the very first time under the late Mutula Kilonzo, and this was introduced in this House in 2011. By then, he was the Member of Parliament from Boni, and may the Lord rest his soul in peace, Mr. Speaker. And subsequently, Mr. Speaker, in 2015, the same bill was introduced in this House by Honorable David Ocheng, the then MP for Ugenya, Mr. Speaker. The bill has been drafted, and we do know very well, Mr. Speaker, the Constitutional Amendment Bill has to go through the 90 days to enhance the public participation, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, Mr. Speaker, which went around the country, and they did a very good report as far as the change of election date is concerned, Mr. Speaker. It's a straightforward bill, Mr. Speaker, and I beg to move and request Honorable Anthony Kiai, the indomitable Member of Parliament for Muguruini, Mr. Speaker, to second.
Yes, Honorable Kay is very excited by your description and introduction. But Honorable Kay, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm indeed flattered by my colleague's description. Mr. Speaker, I stand to second the motion that the date for election, national elections, be changed from August to December. Reasons being that, Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm a member of Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and I was involved in the public participation. We went around the country I happen to have been in the group that went to Kisumu, Kakamega, Eldoret, and Wajir. And in all the places that we went, the feeling of the masses was that August was a bit misplaced, and the best day for election was to be in December. We received many replies from various groups, individuals, and institutions. And most of the interviewees were of the opinion that the date should be shifted to December. Indeed, when we compiled our report, 72% of all those who were interviewed returned a date in favor for December. December, Mr. Speaker, sir, is a long holiday for many institutions in this country, and therefore it is an ideal time for many who are members of this country, who are involved in matters of school, to participate in the election. Indeed, if it is done in December, the turnout usually is very high. Mr. Speaker, sir, December also happens to be a very dry month, and therefore ideal for people to go out there and vote. August, on the other hand, happens to be a wet month, and therefore not very ideal for people to go and vote out there. Traditionally, in this country, we have always held elections in December, and therefore returning the date to where it was traditionally would be the best thing to do for this country. Finally, Mr. Speaker, sir, in some places in Western Kenya where we went, we were told that August happens to be the month where young boys become men, and is a huge ceremony. And mostly, people from that region, they don't participate in the election because this traditional ceremony for them is very important, and therefore they cannot do anything else when it is happening. I second. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Honourable members, I propose the question which is the Constitution of Kenya Amendment number 2, Bill, National Assembly Bill number 5 of 2018, be read a second time. Member for Endebess.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to support this amendment bill sponsored by Honorable Chris Wamalwa, who is my neighbor, a member for Kiminini. Mr. Speaker, moving the date from August to December is the most ideal thing. And going by history of this country, the original drafters of the Kenyan Constitution during the Lancaster Conference fixed the date to be December, and that has been happening until the other day when we came up with the Kenyan Constitution 2010 that now changed the date to August. Mr. Speaker, we've had our own challenges based on the previous two elections.
Order. It is not possible to do that, honorable member. And you know, I can tell you have realized what you did. You can't cross from my left to my right. Please, Honorable Jaguar, please get to where you should get to, bow and join the other side. Yes. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying before that interruption, is that when our forefathers came up with the Kenyan Constitution during the Lancaster Conference, the date was fixed in December. This makes it ideal for everybody to participate in the elections, because elections, voting, Mr. Speaker, is a right for every Kenyan above 18 years who is in the age bracket to vote. It's a one-man vote,
and everybody has a right to be able to vote. During the month of December, and you find that people have festivities where they are traveling to their home counties. And you normally find that even buses are always full in December because people want to travel and be with their families. So that is the most ideal time for us to be able to vote. We've had our challenges with the last 2 elections because being done in the month of August, which is very rainy, and you begin your campaigns during the month of June, July, when schools are supposed to be running, when children are supposed to be in schools, and considering that the polling centers mostly are schools. Therefore, for people to be, for the IBC to be able to prepare the polling stations so that people can be able to go and vote there. You even imagine where you have your tallying center. For instance, for us in Endebess, we had it at the Endebess Technical Training Institute. And in that place, to access it, the road was quite impassable because of the heavy rains, and it made it very difficult for everybody to be able to participate. So, to me, Mr. Speaker, I think this is a very wise decision, and I know that we could have people who are opposing it for their own reasons, but majority of the Kenyans has put it, even from a survey that was done by our colleagues, out of the questions and the public participation, you have 72%. That's a very big number supporting it. I hope it is not like the Ipsos one. I think this was a more credible one, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I think this is a very important bill that will need it to be put, the question to be put even during when the House's members are able to marshal the numbers, because being a constitutional bill, it requires 2/3 of us to be able to support this bill so that we can make an important milestone that will be able to enable us to carry out elections and have people not complain that we were not able to vote, the turnout was low because of the rains or the schools, or we had other commitments, and therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to join my colleagues in supporting this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Oluoch Tom, member for Madare.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to rise to partially support, but propose that an amendment be placed on this. Mr. Speaker, the reason for this is that the Constitution, we are taught, is a living document, and that the Constitution ought to be construed looking at every aspect of the Constitution, each speaking to the other. That's the first point. The second point, Mr. Speaker, is that a piecemeal amendment to the Constitution may eventually end up destroying the very architecture and basis of the Constitution of Kenya 2010. This I am saying taking into account, knowing that there are various other initiatives that are in place also intending to amend this Constitution. We have the Kamket Bill, which I suspect is still somewhere being processed. There are 2 or 3 petitions, some of which intend to either affect the tenure of office of this Parliament, of the Senate, governors and other elective seats, including, I think, one that proposes the extension of the term of the office of the President. If this is done, my view would have been that we ought to put all this in either an omnibus amendment or have a platform where the nation can dialogue on all the proposed initiatives, including the building of bridges, that if you're going to make any amendments that will affect the tenure of office of the President, then you have to go to the referendum. So in respect of this, Mr. Speaker, I would agree that there is need to stagger our elections so that our other elective seats take place in December, but in respect of the election of the office of the President, the same should remain at August, because as of the 31st of October 2017, the President was gazetted, and by the 31st of August 2022, another President must be in place. The period intervening that end December, when the election is proposed to be made, will have extended the tenure of office of the current president. And so I will be proposing an amendment, which I have already given notice of, but I do support the other parts in terms of staggering the other elective seats to December. Thank you.
Shall we have Honorable Mutunga?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to stand and speak to this particular bill that intends to amend the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I'll take my cue from the previous speaker, who has alluded to the fact that there are many initiatives that intend to amend the Constitution, and it might be useful that as Kenyans and as members of Parliament to actually bring these initiatives together to try and see to what extent we are trying to amend the Constitution. However, Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this particular initiative, even though we are saying that we should amalgamate all of them. First and foremost, August is not a very good month, having come right from the point when we have the government has changed, the government here has ended, and therefore so many factors may not be captured into the financial year. It may not have been factored into the financial year because we cannot project the outcome of an election, and we may not be able to tell exactly what we need to plan for before the election is done. On the other hand, Mr. Speaker, if we look at the last election and last year specifically, we had many issues that affected the election process, and they tended to affect the systems and procedures in this country, especially the education system. We had a problem with the examinations. There was so much tension with the students not knowing whether they would take their exams in time. The need for assurance had to be there, and there is need for us to be anticipatory that anything can happen after an election. And therefore, it is good for us to have a month like December. And Mr. Speaker, I propose that it comes in early December so that it coincides with the festive season, with the onset of the festive season. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that if we do it that way, people will be ready to even go for the election, and the campaigns will be even done in a better environment, and therefore I think we shall be able to have a better date, and thereafter the celebrations will be merged. It is generally a celebration period, and therefore people will be able to move on well. Mr. Speaker, I would like also to agree to the fact that it is a low season when it comes to business, the tourism business and other businesses. It is at a time when Kenyans release themselves to processes that are a lot more relaxation, and therefore it is a time that probably can be a lot better than it is right now. This came in after the adoption of the Constitution 2010, and I think, Mr. Speaker, if we change this date, we will go back to the tradition, and we will be able to have December as a transition month. December is a transition month because everybody aims at a new year when you do new things. It would also be good for us to start a government in the new year with new things. And it is also marks the window of a financial year when probably will be, somewhere after the first quarter of the financial year, when we would probably have adjustments that would enable us to move in tandem with the requirements of the time. So, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Shall we now have Honorable Osotsi Godfrey?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this motion. Mr. Speaker, I'll join my colleague, Anthony Oluoch, in saying that I partially support this motion. Mr. Speaker, whereas I agree with the very valid reasons given to justify why we need the elections in December and not August, we must also be alive to the fact that this Constitution is highly integrated. One section of the Constitution affects many other parts of the Constitution. So any attempt to amend part of the Constitution has the effect of affecting many other parts of the Constitution. And as my colleague Anthony has said, that there are so many requests and proposals to amend this Constitution. I think, Mr. Speaker, when we passed this Constitution in 2010, we were told that after 10 years, we will have an opportunity to reflect back, audit what has been implemented, to see how it has worked. And then on the basis of that audit, we will now determine what we need to change. I think we are now almost 10 years. We are now 8 years since we passed that Constitution. And I think this is an opportunity for Kenyans to reflect on what has been implemented in the Constitution, what has worked, and what has not worked. It is only after having a structured process of implementation of this Constitution and an audit of what has been implemented is when we can determine what needs to be changed and what needs to be maintained. But if we encourage a scenario where we are coming up with piecemeal amendments to this Constitution, we'll go back to what we had initially. You remember the independent Constitution went through numerous amendments to the extent that the Constitution now became not very favorable to this country. And that is why Kenyans started the process of a total overhaul of the Constitution. So we do not want to get back to where we came from as a country. Mr. Speaker, I have a copy of the report by the committee. Reading through the report, it is clear that we had almost equal viewpoints on whether to support or whether not to support the change of election date. Even within the committee, one of the members gave a dissenting opinion. That is Honorable Peter Kaluma, who is a very distinguished lawyer on matters of the Constitution. And he raised very fundamental issues. One of the very important issues that he raised is that the amendments proposed are likely to change the term of office of the president. And you know that the change of the term of office of the president is one of the grounds for a referendum. So therefore it means that these amendments will have to go through a popular vote, referendum. It is not going to be the domain of the National Assembly and the Senate alone. It will also require the voice of Kenyans. So, Mr. Speaker, whereas I totally agree with the reasons why we need to change the election date, because of the school calendar and because of the budgetary issues, it is important that we look at changes in the Constitution in a holistic manner rather than a peaceful manner that we are trying to advance. And one other important thing is that I think we should also start thinking about how do we live with this date of August? Because I think the reasons given are more administrative. The school calendars is an administrative issue, it's not a constitutional issue. We can reconfigure the dates for the school. So, Mr. Speaker, my viewpoint, as it has been alluded by Honorable Lodge, is that can we consolidate all these initiatives, constitutional review, take them through a very structured, people-driven process, come with recommendations, pass them through referendum where necessary, and then we can say we have now a new date, election date. But these efforts to try and carry out piecemeal amendment of the Constitution may be very costly. Because as I said, Mr. Speaker, every part of the Constitution is key and is intertwined with other parts of the Constitution. For example, as alluded here by Honorable Kaluma, that these amendments affect the term of office of the President, which is key, because that means Honorable Uhuru Kenyatta will be in office up to December 2022. Now, the dynamics will be political, legal, and constitutional dynamics will be so huge for this country to handle. So, Mr. Speaker, I partially support.
Very well. Very well. Honorable Gitonga.
Is there another Gitonga in this house? Murugara. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for allowing me to rise to support this bill. As a member of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, I actually participated in the public hearings that gave us the report which has been tabled and which has been referred to by Honorable Osotsi. I wish to confirm that the committee went around the country and took views from all corners representative of the Republic. 90% of all the persons who gave their views supported this. So it is not true for the honorable member to state that there was almost equal division in terms of pros and cons. I also wish to confirm that out of the committee of more than 19, possibly 19 members, only one of them gave a dissenting opinion. And he was entitled to do so, and he had his reasons. It is important to note that constitutional amendments may actually not be brought omnibus. Constitutional amendments will be brought as and when it becomes necessary to amend the Constitution. It happens like that everywhere in the world, and that is why Americans are very, very keen on trying to number them, right from the First Amendment to the Fifth Amendment, all the way to whatever number it is they have. Those are not made in one day, but they are actually made progressively as life goes on. We were given quite a number of reasons why the citizens of the Republic felt that the date should be changed, and the most important or the most common one was that school calendar must be respected, that exams which are ordinarily done in the months of October and November should be respected and given some sanity when they are being done, instead of being embroiled in political disputes, especially where there is a rerun and the numerous petitions that take place. So it was felt that we should have the elections in December when life is calm, children are out of school, and every citizen is actually in the festive mood. And what we wanted to compare is what happens where elections are done in December and when they were done in August. The turnout was better in December than it was in August. The second reason that we were given is that August is too close to the end of the financial year, and especially now that we have to work with the famous IFMIS, that in August there may be problems in accessing funds to finance the election. But when this is done in December, there is sufficient time to organize and ensure that the funds set aside for elections are actually utilized. The only problem the Honorable Chris Wamala will have is to marshal the requisite numbers that are required to pass a constitutional amendment. Of late, you have seen what is happening in terms of members being in the House, and therefore quite some lobbying will have to be done so that this is actually done by the 2/3 majority. There are very many other constitutional petitions that are pending. Some of them are seeking to amend various articles of the Constitution, but unfortunately, they are all not at the same stage. Unless this House resolves that we have to shelve every petition, every bill, every motion that comes in until we are able to raise the requisite number, then we cannot do this in a manner that is omnibus. So my own opinion is that each proposed amendment will have to be dealt with at the appropriate time it comes, in the manner that is designated by the Constitution, and where the Constitution says this can be done by the Houses of Parliament, then we will have to go by that procedure. If it requires the public initiative, which is the referendum, then again we would have to consider and we would have to go to it. There are consequences of every legislation that we pass, and if we pass this one, which says that elections will be held in December, there will be some slight addition in the terms of the elected members of either Parliament, National Assembly, governors, or even the presidency. But again, that is a consequence of a law that we are going to enact, and we have to live with it. It is not so grave if the citizens of the country feel that it is to their advantage. With those remarks, I do support this bill, and I pray that we are able to marshal the numbers that are requisite so that we can actually pass it into the first constitutional amendment of the Constitution of 2010. Thank you.
Should we now have Honorable Wanyonyi Kevin?
Mr. Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank Honorable Chris Wamala for coming up with this constitutional amendment. And I think having participated, can you protect me from the neighborhood? Huh? The neighborhood is actually disrupting my
You
contribution.
certainly remain protected.
Yeah, very good. Mr. Speaker, first and foremost, I think as outlined and as expected, the committee went around. And you can see from the outcome of the opinion of the people out there that the matters come here. 90% agree with the date, to change the date from August to December. Mr. Speaker, I agree. One thing is that turnout from the previous elections, those of us who have actually voted more than twice, 3 times, December normally is a very good turnout. And mostly people, when they vote because they're at home. August, as you know, Mr. Speaker, most people actually are working. It becomes very inconvenient for even a family to live in Nairobi, or wherever, Mombasa, even overseas, to come mid-year, to go home and do the voting. So December becomes very ideal because actually, in this country, with the climatic changes and what we have known, is that it's a very dry period. And therefore, people come to enjoy the holiday, at the same time to elect their leaders. Mr. Speaker, I think December is quite ideal. Secondly, or thirdly, some of us from Western Kenya, I'm sorry, it's not really trivial, but most people from Western Kenya, it's actually a historical time when you have all sort of ceremonies there, including circumcision for our youth, and it becomes very difficult. Last time, and you can see even now, suppose the election were held today, this month, it's be very disruptive. And 2, of course, last general election, and all of us here present, apart from those nominated, took part in the last general election. It was in August. The turnout was very poor. In fact, in my own case, it became so difficult even to get people because it was raining. It rained the whole day. On that day, it rained the whole day. And therefore, you can't even provide. Only a few people who support you will come to be for election on that particular day. And Mr. Speaker, I saw that on the material that even counting became very difficult, even transporting of material to places for the polling centers was also an issue. In my own case, in fact, 2 trucks got stuck with the material until somewhere around 9 or 10 o'clock. We had to send the tractors to go to pull the hole. So, Mr. Speaker, this is not... Well, listen, Buana. Why are you answering me here? I'll give you a chance to talk.
What is happening with your neighbor there?
I want to move from here. Next time I want to be sitting here because Mheshimiwa here is very, very loud. He doesn't console in low tones. Thirdly, I think there was this Honorable Loch was talking about two different elections where we have members of parliament, maybe MCAs and senators, and being elected in December, and the president maybe another date. It becomes very difficult, Mr. Speaker, because the risk you run here is that if there are 2 separate elections, there will be due influence. For example, if elections were done now for the president in August, and the other general election for members of parliament, senators, what have you, in December, of course, whoever have been elected will have an influence on those that are going to stand for election in December. So we should have this election as proposed by Honorable Chris Omola, that on from the president up to the MCA. We should have one general election. And amendment is not a problem. As actually the previous speaker mentioned, constitution changes come and they are changed as conveniently as they come. So there's nothing wrong with us actually having this amendment being done, so long as, of course, we amass the 2/3 of the members in this House, which is possible. We'll be able to have the time to amend that and go to the Senate, also have the people coerce and what have you to vote for this amendment. Because amendment is the Constitution, and we have done so many amendments in this House, Mr. Speaker. A lot of amendments have been done in this House as it comes, because this is a very ideal if you are serious on this particular amendment. And the tourists, for example, the 2017, we lost a lot of money for this country because tourists could not come in this country because that was a wrong time. And therefore, of course, again, people fear the outcome of such elections anywhere in Africa. So see Zimbabwe, for example, we've had problems. Even South Africa, which you thought that is a very advanced democratic state, there are also problems there. So let's have election at a peaceful date, and the date, I think, as proposed by Honorable Chris Omola, and I want to remove my hat on that, that actually the best time for this country should be December. Let's not have other side shows on the whole thing. I support, and I want to request members of this August House to come in large numbers and form 2/3 of us sitting here to amend this particular for the convenience and for the prosperity of this country. Thank you so much.
Ore Sankok.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. That is a hiccup of technology. And since we are a digital nation, we have already come back. And so thank you very much, Honorable Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Honorable Wanyonyi was a bit worked up by Honorable Koyo. But Honorable Wanyonyi, be assured, Honorable Koyo is a professional noisemaker, so don't worry about it. Honorable Speaker, protect me, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker.
Order, Honorable Sankok.
Honorable Speaker.
Order, Honorable Sankok. Order. What is it, Honorable Oyo Onyango, member for Muhoroni?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think the standing order inhibits members from casting aspersions against others. And most who are nominated member to cast aspersion on an old member is found here. And somebody disabled who is not, does not have full use of his entire body. So this is very bad.
Honorable Onyango, I think Honorable Sankok, you know, you could say the same thing differently. Members are allowed to consult. Maybe they should consult at low tone. Honorable Sankok, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. And before I was rudely interrupted by my great friend, I was saying that August, an election that is supposed to be held on August, is really disruptive on our calendar, not only on our school calendar, because you remember, Honorable Speaker, in the previous election where we had a rerun again of a repeat of the election, some of us actually had to go a step forward and say that our children will not die if their election is postponed a bit. That only shows the country how the election was actually disrupting our school calendar. Honorable Speaker, it is not only about the school calendar. During the August month in this country, it is normally the highest season of tourists visiting our country. Honorable Speaker, again during the month of August, we are only 2 months after the budget day, and probably INFIS is not yet open up. There are not enough funds. The activities of state cooperation during the month of August are normally enhanced. That is the time they are now budgeting on their year and setting up their performance contract during that month of August. Honorable Speaker, during the month of August again, it is a harvesting season in our country. We harvest maize, we harvest barley, wheat, and actually generally, it is a season that we are so busy. And at that time, when there is an election, there is that electioneering fever, and it disrupts even those farmers. You know, you don't necessarily farm in Nairobi if you live in Nairobi. Sometimes your farm is in Narok, your farm is in Baringo, but you live in Nairobi. At that time, you are busy, probably harvesting, and it is an election day. Honorable Speaker, again, it is normally the second Tuesday of August. And on top of Tuesday, it is in the middle of the week. Some people were on duty on Monday. And again, they are required to be on duty on Wednesday. Yet they registered as voters 1,000 kilometers away, because some of the civil servants are transferred on daily basis. So probably you are registered as a voter in Kisumu. You are transferred to Mandera. And then you are required to have one single day to travel from Mandera to Kisumu to go and vote and back. And that is what explained the low turnout during the August election. But during December election, most of us are relaxed. Most companies, private, have given their employees the holiday. And all of us and our children are at home. We have finished harvesting. We are in a festive mood. So this is just one of the festivals that we will enjoy even during voting. So, Honorable Speaker, for me, I do support the moving of the election date from August to December. And Honorable Speaker, I want to congratulate Honorable Chris Wamala for bringing this debate. I know he's a ranked member in this House. We have learned a lot from him, and that is why his intellect and wits have seen it deemed necessary to bring such a very important motion or amendment of our Constitution, which we realized immediately after promulgation of the Constitution. Just the following, the first election, the whole country was complaining of the August election time. Honorable Speaker, we are also lucky to be in a house, the Chamber of Parliament, that have distinguished lawyers who will guide us where necessary during this amendment. I'm referring to lawyers like Omolo Otiende, Honorable Kaluma, Honorable Cheboy, Honorable Murugaru here. They will guide us in making sure that we are within the required law. And also, we have people like Honorable Ndwale who have a lot of experience. And Honorable Speaker, we are even more lucky that we are in the Chamber of Parliament under the leadership of the Speaker, Honorable Muturi, who have just been elected as the chairman of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. I know, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Muturi, in terms of our constitution and the law, is a mobile encyclopedia. So we'll really be guided with his intellect on this issue. Honorable Speaker, I was a bit perturbed by what Honorable Onsonsi was saying, that he partially.
Honorable Oluoch Tom, you seem to have an intervention. What is it?
Is the Honorable Sankok, who is a very good friend of mine, in order to insinuate that some of us are less of lawyers in this house. We are also ranking lawyers, Honorable Sankok. Are you in order to insinuate that Honorable Oluoch may not rank somewhere there?
Honorable Sankok, do you want to get to that uncharted waters?
Honorable Speaker, if we really want to be recognized, I recognize you. You have had your day. I'm sure now you are smiling. You know, sometimes some of these things are not necessarily demanded. They are earned. And those I have recognized, like Honorable Chris Wamalwa, had earned my recognition. Now that you have demanded, I have decided to recognize you under your demand. Honorable Speaker, before I was rudely interrupted, Honorable Speaker, again, and I wish now I will not be interrupted again, I was saying, Honorable Speaker, that we are lucky to be in this house this time when we are amending this constitution. Honorable Speaker, I was referring to a statement by Honorable Onsonsi by saying that he partially supports, you know, this issue of becoming a watermelon and being in the middle. Honorable Speaker, allow members either to support or to reject. You know, this issue, you know, some of us are from the background of being supporters of people who presume to be watermelon. Honorable Speaker, we are not talking of the total amendment of our constitution. There was a time that we appealed in this country our independent constitution, especially Article 2A, and it actually assisted this country. If the appealing of this particular, the amendment of this particular law will assist this country, so be it, Honorable Speaker. And we cannot say that there will be other petitions, there is other proposals. Then let them come. As they come, we deal with them as they come. It is, we have now a proposal in front of this house. Ours is to marshal enough support so that we can make sure that it goes through the floor of this house for the benefit of Kenyans. Any appeal that is for the benefit of Kenyans, we do support without necessarily being partially support, partially not supporting, because we may not understand where you belong. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Very well. Before I get to my left, let me give Honorable Wetangula Wanyonyi, member for Westerns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want also to contribute to this motion for amendment of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, while I wish to support this amendment, but also I look at it also differently. Like as a member of Parliament from Nairobi, December for us is very dangerous because there is a migration of people to rural areas. So Nairobi will be empty and you can easily lose an election, Mr. Speaker. I believe August, maybe the other time, Mr. Speaker, we held an election in March, and it was just as good. So I believe if we move away from August, I think March will be an appropriate date. But Mr. Speaker, I want to say that indeed, this constitution has been in existence for about 7 years, and I think it's the highest time now we did the audit of the constitution, because there are provisions in this constitution that are not practical, that we need to bring them to life, to the life situation in Kenya, so that we move forward, Lord, Mr. Speaker. We remove the 20% that was alluded to during the referendum when we passed the constitution in 2010, that 20% was not good and 80% was good. And we have seen where the 20% is, including the election date. Mr. Speaker, I know when we are the makers of this constitution, in their own wisdom, when they picked the date of August, I think they were looking at many things, but we overlooked things like we are going to interfere with the school calendar, we are going to interfere with our budget cycles, Mr. Speaker, and many other things. December is appropriate date, Mr. Speaker, as I said, but as a member of parliament from Nairobi, it is also a bit dangerous for us because it will require us to make sure that people don't go home at that time, depending when the election is held. And also, Mr. Speaker, election occurs also the campaigning period. It actually interferes with the learning, it interferes with the economy, it interferes with many things, Mr. Speaker. That's the time when we are preparing to, even those who are do agriculture, Mr. Speaker, it's the time for harvesting and all that, Mr. Speaker. So I believe, Mr. Speaker, it's the highest time now we look at how we can now amend the Constitution and have some of these provisions, but we need actually to come up with a comprehensive amendment so that we don't have these piecemeal amendments that will keep on popping up and will require, Mr. Speaker, some may require the referendum, especially this when it extends the term of the president, presidential in office. It will require a referendum, Mr. Speaker. But I believe, and I support, Mr. Speaker, because this is the right thing to do, and I believe the election in December will give all of us a good time, Mr. Speaker, to participate in the election. There will be, the schools will have closed and many other things, Mr. Speaker. People will be in a holiday mood, and I know turnout will be high because previously that's what has happened, and we have held elections in December until we got this new constitution. Mr. Speaker, I support the amendment of the constitution. Thank you.
Honorable Nyikal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support this amendment, this bill that's seeking to amend the Constitution by taking into consideration the other issues that have been raised by other members like Honorable Oluoch. Mr. Speaker, this issue has come on and off since 2013. Mr. Speaker, as indicated earlier by other members, Honorable Mutula was the first. Mutula Kilonzo was the first to come with this amendment. At that time, Mr. Speaker, there was even a cabinet committee that was set up to look at the date of the election. And the proposal was actually that it should be in December. However, that came to Parliament and somehow it didn't pass through. I wasn't in Parliament then. Mr. Speaker, in the last Parliament, David Ochieng came with the same amendment. And Mr. Speaker, now you hear that there's even been, we are informed that there's been a public participation. What that means, Mr. Speaker, is that there is need for an amendment. People have realized that there's an issue with the date. So I think it's the time that we looked at it seriously. In all these attempts, Mr. Speaker, the reasons have been the same. School calendar and exams, synchronized budget for the East African community, the 5 countries, the issue of tourism, the issue of farmers, the issue of traditional ceremonies such as circumcision. And Mr. Speaker, again it shows that this is a matter that we are keen to have sorted out. However, Mr. Speaker, there are real constitutional considerations. It's not simply changing the date. As we have seen in the bill itself, once we look at the date of the election, it touches on all other parts of the Constitution, including extension of the terms of offices, including that of the President. And, Mr. Speaker, we are also aware that there are very many initiatives that are going on, including the Committee of 14, which is coming with the Building Bridges effort. So all these initiatives, we know they are in the offing. We know there are members that have actually put bills that may be coming looking to amend the Constitution. So, Mr. Speaker, there is need to look at a comprehensive way of taking into consideration all these initiatives, taking into consideration what is really recognized as a need to change the date of the election to December. So, Mr. Speaker, I support it because we really have to bring this to a conclusion.
What is it, Honorable Itito?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And because I can see the bill, we are all supporting it. And we are almost going to recess. If we could at least get 5 minutes each rather than the required time, we could go to the other bills before we go to recess.
Honorable Waitito, you are basically appealing to the members. The chair may not make a... Yes, what is it, Majority Leader? What is your...
Mr. Speaker, Honorable Waitito is in order, but you should have done it after when the mover and the second and the question was put. You should have stood on a point of order at that time. With now, he cannot, I think procedurally, in the standing orders, he cannot purport to change the course of the river like Honorable Waitito wants to do his namesake. His namesake, midway.
Yes, I think Majority Leader, you are saying exactly what I was saying, that look, Honorable Waitito, you can only appeal to the members, and your appeal is not binding on them. But if we would have raised at the right time, that would have happened. Honorable Nyikal, please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, was basically coming to the end, and all I said, I support this, but we need to realize that there is definitely going to be an issue of referendum because of the many issues that this is likely to touch. With that, Mr. Speaker, I support, and I think we should conclude this matter once and for all.
Yes, yes, Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I stand to contribute to this bill, this is the same bill that Honorable David Ocheng proposed to the House in the 11th Parliament. And he seeks to amend Articles Honorable Wamalwa seeks to amend Articles 101, 136, 2A, 177, 1A, and 180, 1A of the Constitution of Kenya relating to all those offices. Because we must deal with the election of a president, the election of county assembly, the election of governors, and the election of members of parliament. All these, Mr. Speaker, are interrelated. And Mr. Speaker, you cannot per se say that a constitutional amendment bill is unconstitutional. But I need to raise a number of issues regarding this bill. And the Speaker, for the House to note that this bill has been introduced in the House pursuant to Article 256 of the Constitution, which is amendment by parliamentary initiative. That is how it has found itself on the floor of the House today. And you can amend the Constitution of Kenya either through a parliamentary initiative or through a referendum. Then, Mr. Speaker, this bill has been scheduled for second reading today, Wednesday, 29th August 2018, during this morning session. And for this bill, Mr. Speaker, to pass, it requires to garner the support of not less than 2/3 of the members in both the National Assembly and the Senate, pursuant to Article 256, subsection 1D of the Constitution. If passed by the two houses as contemplated in that article that I have just read of 256 1D, the implication of this bill shall be to extend the term of office of both the President and Parliament. That is the intent and the purpose. And pursuant to Article 255 1F of the Constitution, any bill, Mr. Speaker, and I read, any bill to amend the Constitution whose end result is to extend the term of the President must be subjected to a referendum for approval. This is the issues that I must raise. Because in essence, this bill is extending the term of the President. So, and if you want to extend the term of the President, you must subject. That power only lies with the people of Kenya. It doesn't lie with this House. So, Mr. Speaker, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that, and you know, coming from a background of a pastoralist, before we shift our homesteads, we go out and look for and make sure there's water and pasture and free of animal diseases. So I am just trying to tell Honorable Wamalwa that the road ahead is very bumpy. The road ahead is very expensive. And what you are trying to do, Honorable Wamalwa, is not a walk in the park, is not a birthday party. So, you know, it's good that you prepare yourself. Because Article 255 1F of the Constitution, which I have just read, whose end result is to extend the term of the President, that extension must be subjected to a referendum for approval for the people of Kenya to have their say. Mr. Speaker, so in the view of the above that I have just said, the passage of this bill shall have cost implications, given the need for a referendum required for its approval. Even when both houses with that threshold is passed, it is the President now to set the ball rolling for a referendum. And I am sure, as a leader of majority and being a very good friend of Honorable Wamalwa, I am ready to lobby and make sure that the 2/3 threshold is reached. So the passage of this bill, Mr. Speaker, shall have cost implications given the need for a referendum. So what am I saying? The bill cannot be amended by the House and has to be passed as it is without any alteration. Another very, very key point, Mr. Speaker, is that a constitutional bill cannot be amended. So, cannot be amended. Either at the committee of the whole House, the way it is either you reject it in totality or you approve it in totality. There will be no amendment that can be brought in any constitutional bill. And, Mr. Speaker, it has to be passed as it is, without any amendment, without any alteration whatsoever, and in line with the previous ruling by the Speaker. And I really want members of this House, particularly the new members, even the old members, to pick the ruling of Speaker Muturi dated 20th of August 2015 by a copy of the rulings attached. And I have a copy here because this is a house of record. So after I finish, I can leave it, I can table it, Mr. Speaker. It's a very, very good ruling that the Speaker made that relating to the same bill in the last Parliament. So what the Speaker said about the similar bill by Honorable Member for Ugenya David Ochieng is here, and that in summary, the two questions that the Speaker put was that I will not allow any amendment to this bill proposed by a member for Uganda or indeed any other member, other four published bills proposing to amend the Constitution, and that the determination as to whether the bill proposing to amend the Constitution requires the approval by a referendum in terms of Articles 255 and 256 of the Constitution is therefore in the purview of the Speaker. So, and I've talked to Honorable Wamalwa, it's about interpretation of the Constitution. Different people view it differently. But I felt I had an obligation as the leader of majority to set the record straight, and so that my friend Honorable Wamalwa, as he prepares on this journey, he knows the pitfalls, he knows where the challenges are, and as he goes into Mau Forest or Boni Forest, he carries enough water and food to sustain him for the long haul. I beg to give my views.
Well, the Honorable Member for Kilifi North, the Honorable Bayer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I like what the Leader of Majority said, that he begs to give his views. Mr. Speaker, constitutional amendments is a constitutional right that Kenyans and this Parliament has powers as bestowed in the Constitution to amend. And therefore, we cannot in any way be swayed away from exercising that constitutional right. Kenyans need to exercise their rights in the Constitution as enshrined. And therefore, this is an opportunity that Kenyans should not let go. The United States has had 27 amendments to their Constitution. And you realize that this Constitution was passed, I think, around 1787. And by 1789, they introduced the First Amendment. 2 years after the promulgation of the US Constitution, amendments were introduced. For us to say that we cannot introduce an amendment because we want to have a whole constitutional overhaul 10 years out after is actually not doing what tradition demands of us in terms of constitutional amendment. A constitution can be amended any other time because the same constitution gives the people the right to amend it. And therefore, in riding on that traditions that great democracies have had amendments to the Constitution without any upheavals or political temperatures, Kenya has reached that threshold of democracy where Kenya has matured as a democratic country, and therefore it should be able to pass a constitutional amendment without any rancor in this country, here in Parliament, and a referendum that is not politicized. Hearing the Leader of Majority telling you that this journey is bumpy and long and all that is alluding to the old methods of constitutional amendment that this country has had, where when there is a constitutional amendment or constitutional overhaul, you have the whole country ignited into a whole campaign or a political campaign mood. I think we have reached a situation in this country that we can run away from that. We don't have to go that way. We can still maturely sit down as a country to make constitutional amendments without political rancor. Looking at the country first, this country requires this amendment to ensure that the election comes at an appropriate time when everybody in this country is ready for an election. Not because of the dictates of saying that, you see, this article will affect this article. Yes, it will do that. But the country and the Constitution itself allows us to continue to amend until we get to the canon that we want for this country. And therefore, I would say that we should prepare as a country to change our minds, that constitutional amendment will become them versus us. You know, that's what we've had. In the past, when we wanted to change the old constitution, you know, it became them versus us, and therefore the whole country was torn into two pieces. Therefore, it became a political war, and it determined the following election. We can run away from that by ensuring that we make this constitutional amendment to ensure that we get an election that does not differentiate other Kenyans. You know, this election that comes in August differentiates a lot of Kenyans. If you look at my constituency, I had 120,000 registered voters. Those who voted were around 70%. And you find out why. They will tell you the date was not good for me to come home to vote, and yet they had taken a voter's card from the village. But August, as a month, looking at it and the upheavals that surround it, disenfranchised many Kenyans. Probably, if we had had an election in December, the results of that election would have been different, because there would have many people go to their polling station to vote. And therefore, it is very important for us to consider not only school dates and examinations, but also to look at, are we enfranchising more Kenyans to come out to vote, or are we giving a date that disenfranchises? Probably, like my good friend Wanyonyi Wetangula has said, probably the reason is to keep people in Nairobi to vote for the Nairobians. Probably, because that's what he alluded to. But we want people to go there and exercise the democratic right. When they vote for a president, they should also vote for the other offices. You know what we had, if you look at the statistics, you realize that probably many more people, the presidential votes were more than those that were cast in the other elections. Reason is because many people stayed in Nairobi to vote for the president, but they did not know who to choose as a councillor. They did not know how to use in the city. The only change they had was in the village, where they would have voted for an MP. And therefore, to give every person an opportunity to exercise that rare moment to elect the leaders of this country, it is to ensure that we have an appropriate date. And that appropriate date comes in December, when everybody is available to exercise that right. Mr. Speaker, my friend Waititu would like to... no, I can... the Speaker has...
The Honorable Waititu. The Honorable Waititu, what is out of order?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My good friend there is a very good friend of his members of the county government. Yes. They are now not councillors, because I want you to continue with the friendship. Yes. Now they are MCAs. Yes.
Very good. Okay. Very good. Thank you for the information, my good friend. So what I'm saying is that we need to give every Kenyan an opportunity to elect every leader. You know, this thing of there was 6 ballots, but somebody voted for only 1 ballot. So for us to empower Kenyans and to elect quality leaders, because if you differentiate people, you end up not electing quality leaders, because the minority that are available will elect. And therefore, there are many people that have been elected by minorities. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, while we are looking at the finances of this country cannot dictate democracy. Democracy actually gives an opportunity for finances to be properly apportioned. And therefore, you need quality leaders to do that job. And that can only come when the right date is there. Now, I've come from a school that says that when the principle is right, then everything follows on that path. If the principle is wrong, then everything that follows after it is wrong. Now, if you have a wrong date for an election, you end up having a wrong election for this country. And therefore, I urge this House to push this country to go the whole hog, even if we must go to a referendum. But this date must change for democratic gains of this country to be achieved wholesomely. Mr. Speaker, I thank you, and I beg to support.
Very good contributions, and it is noted that you have said that members seem to be in agreement that if elections were held in December, then the result could have been different. Then it also means that many of the members here probably would be different also. Honorable members, allow me to give the next chance to the chair of the Justice and Legal Committee, who has just walked in, as you all can see, but I think he has something to say to this, and I think it's important coming from that particular committee. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the bill. And Mr. Speaker, I want to take this chance to thank Honorable Wamalwa for coming up with these proposed amendments to amend the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, changing the date of the elections from August to December. Mr. Speaker, I chair the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, and this bill came before, was referred to my committee, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Speaker, and I wanted to inform the House that these proposed amendments received overwhelming support from the Kenyan people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we split the committee into 3 groups. One group went through Western and Nyanza, parts of our country. Another group, Mr. Speaker, took through public hearings in Nairobi, Machakos, Mombasa, and another group, Mr. Speaker, again went to northern Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I want to inform the House that we covered the entire country for 2 good weeks, Mr. Speaker, listening to Kenyans to give their views on the proposed amendment, Mr. Speaker. And in the interest of time, Mr. Speaker, I will just want to summarize and say that out of the various public hearings, Mr. Speaker, 1,845 persons and 59 institutions or groups turned, Mr. Speaker, appeared before the committee during the public hearings in various parts of our country. And Mr. Speaker, it is very important for this House to know, because the public participation, Mr. Speaker, the consumers of this amendment, of this law, changing the date to December, Mr. Speaker, are the Kenyan people, the voters themselves, those who are going to use that date, Mr. Speaker, to choose their leaders. Among the institutions which submitted their views to the committee, Mr. Speaker, and these are institutions, Mr. Speaker, which has a huge membership. For example, Amani National Congress Women League in Mombasa, Center for Human Rights and Democracy, Center for Enhanced Democracy and Good Governance, Center for Multi-Party Democracy, Center for Rights and Awareness, Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Speaker, just imagine the membership of the Chambers of Commerce. It's a huge institution with a big population. Center for Rights and Council of Imams, Council of Elders of Isholo, Boma, Borana, Federation of Women Lawyers. Mr. Speaker, those are very, very serious institutions. The Kenya Girl Guide Association, Kenya National Union of Teachers, Mr. Speaker, Maendeleo ya Wanawake, Political Parties Liaison Committee, Transparency International, United Green Movement. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to really read all of them, but I want to confirm to the House that we received very overwhelming support from these institutions and others that I'm able to mention, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, out of those institutions, 26 supported, 8 did not support these amendments, and the individuals equally. Mr. Speaker, the percentage, if I summarize, 71%, Mr. Speaker, of the institutions and the individuals who appeared before the committee supported this amendment. Only 28% did not. Mr. Speaker, the committee observed that a large number of, that percentage. Mr. Speaker, so I think it is important for us to appreciate the fact that if we go to the Kenyan people, seek their views, and majority of them support, this House, Mr. Speaker, has no option but to go with the wishes. That is my opinion, my humble view, that, Mr. Speaker, What is the Kenyan people? After all, Mr. Speaker, we are here courtesy of the Kenyan people. We are here with exercising the sovereign will of the people. Mr. Speaker, when I say we have no option, I don't think I got the House.
Honorable Sankok, what is out of order?
Honorable Speaker, is the honorable member in order, the chairman of the committee, to insinuate that this House have no option, yet he have brought this amendment to this House so that we can debate. It means that we are doing work that we don't have any option.
The Honorable Sankok, that's a point of argument. That's a point of argument. Let the chair finish his contribution. I think it is an important contribution because these are views of Kenyans, and they went out there and sought those views. I think it's important for the House to know what the views of Kenyans were on the.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to make my colleague happy and to be comfortable, because I am a peacemaker in all these issues. Mr. Speaker, what I'm only saying is that what should persuade this House to agree with this proposed amendment is actually the overwhelming support of the Kenyan people. Honorable Sangog is my good friend, so I want us to move together with him, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to refer members to volume 2 of the report. It has all these, what I've said before, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me then finalize, because I want more members to really have time to contribute to this. Mr. Speaker, those who supported the amendment do so for the following reasons. Let me say a few. Mr. Speaker, the December election date would be less disruptive to the academic calendar for the secondary and primary schools, Mr. Speaker. And I think this has been a major argument in support of this particular proposed amendment. A date in December would be convenient and would increase voter turnout. And Mr. Speaker, already a member, the member who spoke before me, confirmed that he has 130 members, but only 70%. One of the reasons why is because of the convenience of this. August is not convenient for most voters, Mr. Speaker. The December date also was historically sound, as it has been successfully tried and tested many times before. Mr. Speaker, most of us here and Kenyans are used to the December date. Mr. Speaker, apart from the last election, which we did it in August, the 2 elections, Mr. Speaker, most Kenyans are historically conversant, and this has been tested. The December date was an ideal due to favorable weather conditions, unlike August, when it is rainy and farmers are engaged in agricultural activities. Mr. Speaker, this may sound very casual, but it's true, Mr. Speaker, that most parts of the country in August, they receive rain. And Mr. Speaker, even when it comes to announcement of election results, it takes even 3 days, sometimes 4 days. In my own constituency, Mr. Speaker, it's not a very wide constituency, but because of the issues of rain, our roads are not very good, Mr. Speaker. So sometimes even the results are delayed, which could have been done within a day or 2. It takes sometimes 3 days and so on. So, Mr. Speaker, these are the realities on the ground. And it is for us as leaders of this country to appreciate all these issues and be able to go and change this law so that, Mr. Speaker, it is also important to inform this House some of the reasons why members did not support. Those who were against the date, Mr. Speaker, say the August election date was ideal as it was in tandem with the amendment of the government, commencement of the government financial year, which commences in July. That's a good point. Those who may have registered as voters in areas of their ordinary residence normally travel for holidays. So, Mr. Speaker, there are other reasons given by the public. But, Mr. Speaker, when all is said and done, the arguments in support of the proposed amendments are more convincing. They are more practical. Mr. Speaker, compared to the ones that are given not in support of the proposed amendment, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, something which Honorable Duale raised a few minutes ago, and I feel as a chair of the committee, Mr. Speaker, it is important for me to raise this issue as I conclude my submissions on this matter. Mr. Speaker, I want to reaffirm what the majority leader talked about, that in the Speaker, in his communication of 20th of August 2015, guided that no amendments could be proposed to a bill seeking to amend the Constitution unless there was something extraordinary in the bill that would require application of extraordinary measures. Mr. Speaker, this is a house of record. It's a house procedure. The communication you issue there should be respected and must guide the House, Mr. Speaker, as we deal with our businesses. So, Mr. Speaker, that is something which has already been done, not in this Parliament, in the previous Parliament, where I also served with Mr. Honorable Wamalwa, who is really introducing this amendment. So, Mr. Speaker, we don't want to depart from our traditions, which have already established. In view of the Honorable Speaker's ruling, Mr. Speaker, the committee did not adopt further amendments based on the public views. And so, Mr. Speaker, we were alive to that ruling. And that is why, if there were any other amendments, we could not allow as a committee because of that position. Mr. Speaker, in view, and the members of the public who appeared before the committee to present their views overwhelmingly supported the change of date to December. The committee, Mr. Speaker, and this is a very important issue, Mr. Speaker, I wanted just to raise. Remember, Mr. Speaker, the Constitution we are dealing with now was passed by the Kenyan people in 2010. And the committee considered the various reports prepared during the Constitution of Kenya review process, including the report by the Committee of Experts on Constitutional Reforms, the report of the Committee for Constitutional Reforms of Kenya, the final report of the Constitution of Kenya Review Commission, and noted that the reports did not elaborate on the rationale for the change of the date of general elections from December to August. Mr. Speaker, we should be also guided by the previous submissions. Mr. Speaker, we tried to look at the rationale, the reasoning behind the foundation. Why was this date changed from December to August when the new constitution was actually created? Mr. Speaker, we did not come across any justifiable reason that gave rise, apart from the issue that those in Nairobi, those in cities, ought to remain behind so that they fought for their candidates and so on. So, Mr. Speaker, I am satisfied as the chair of the committee. The committee is justified, Mr. Speaker, that looking at the process through which the new constitution was established, there are no justifiable grounds to change the date from December to August. And so, Mr. Speaker, my appeal to my colleagues is that we are here to make laws, amend the Constitution when we feel it is necessary, in a manner that is going to benefit the Kenyan people. Mr. Speaker, one of the speakers earlier spoke about that we allow this to delay until the committee of 14 members comes forward with proposals, perhaps touching on this particular issue. Mr. Speaker, Honorable Wamalwa, in his position as a member of his constituents, has spent time, energy to come up with this bill. Mr. Speaker, public resources has been applied already. When we went around the country for 2 weeks, public funds was spent. Mr. Speaker, we cannot, as a House, be delayed by other arrangements which are being undertaken. That will be dealt with at a time. But, Mr. Speaker, I don't think we need to deny these proposed amendments by Wamalwa to be delayed because of the so-called the building, you see, the bridge or something committee. Mr. Speaker, we want to move as a house and deal with our matters as they come. Mr. Speaker, if there will be other proposed constitutional amendments, Mr. Speaker, we will deal with them as and when they come. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore my humble view to request members that we support this bill so that, Mr. Speaker, we change the date from August to December, as supported by a majority of Kenyans who appeared before the committee. Mr. Speaker, I support.
Honorable members, there's a lot of interest in this matter. I see on my screen here we have 27 requests for members to speak to this. I will therefore urge members to just to try to be considerate to others, and because we seem to be sailing in the same direction. I will therefore follow the script, follow the order of the way members have requested here. And the first one on my list here then is, of course, considering both sides, I will allow the first bite at it to the Honorable Martin Owino, member from Diwa.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful for the opportunity. First of all, let me thank Honorable Chris Wamalwa. He's a great friend of mine. And the committee that went out to collect views. Mr. Speaker, I want to oppose this bill. And allow me to do so with these reasons. One, Mr. Speaker, the problem is not only on the date. Changing a date would not solve this problem. No single bullet will solve a problem in Kenya. Our problem, Mr. Speaker, is electoral malpractice. Even if we move it to December, thank you. Even if we move it to December and there is malpractice in election, the battle, wrangles, streets, whatever you call it, will go on until January, February, March, whatever date it takes. So what we were pushing and what members should look into is election reform. This was one of the agenda in the reducible minimum the NASA put forward. Talk about roads. If you cannot reach a polling center because it is raining in August, why don't you use the money you are proposing to do a referendum to fix those roads? Why? You talk of, I think I support the majority leader. Only he was shy of saying he opposed this motion. But the things he put forward are heavy stuff. First of all, changing this constitutional amendment would need a lot of money. That money, we are even now operating in a budget deficit. We don't even have it. And as I said, Mr. Speaker, it is not changing a date that will make this right. It's having election reform. Secondly, the Nairobi parliamentarian and other urban areas where people migrate to rural areas will abstain from this because the security of every member are the voters. So you are not going to get the 2/3 that we really need. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, the school issue, which has been cited here as a factor, which is right so. Like in my area, which was very volatile in the last election, the schools were interrupted for several months. Not because of the date, but because of the malpractice, lack of transparency and accountability in our voting system. So, Mr. Speaker, what I really want to emphasize here is not changing the date, but look into why people fight when they have voted or their voted are counted and they are not agreeing with it. If we can be as transparent as should be, and if we can organize the voting material, logistics, transportation, whatever, And if a vote which is meant for Honorable Martin Owino is counted for Martin Owino and is announced as is, then we will take only a few hours in the voting center and it is done. So the problem is not the date. The problem is the way we conduct our elections. So I thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I sit down, I say categorically that I oppose this bill.
Very well. The Honorable Gishimu Gidinji, member for Gichugo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to support the constitutional amendment bill. And I thank Honorable Amalwa for the good thought to save the Kenyans from the trouble. Firstly, I do support the month. The month of December, Mr. Speaker, in Kenya is considered to be the holiday month, and especially from the third week. So this is an opportunity where most of the Kenyans will have an opportunity to vote, to exercise their democratic right of voting their leaders from the MCA to the president. The other reason I'm supporting the bill is because of the day. Monday is a very convenient day. For Kenyans, we know that we work up to Friday and others up to Kenyans to travel to various parts of this country so that they can be able to vote on a Monday. Because the way it was before, a Tuesday would require someone to work on a Monday and may lack an opportunity, especially for companies that do not give their workers permission to go and vote. So one would lack an opportunity to exercise that very important democratic right. And there has also been argument from some honorable members here that pushing the date to December would actually be changing the life of the life of the presidency. My interpretation of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, that is not correct. And I thank the crafters and the committee of experts of the Constitution, because in their wording, they indicated that the election shall be in the 5th year, not after 5 years. So they had anticipated a situation whereby a date can be changed, but within the year. So when a date changes from 1 month to another, but within the year, does not extend the life of the presidency. And if you look at the articles that are proposed to be amended by the bill, 137, 177, 136, 101, 177, and 180, the wording is the 5th. So when we move the date from the 2nd Tuesday of August in the 5th year to the 1st Monday of December in the 5th year, we have not changed the life of the presidency. A change of a life of the presidency or the period of the presidency changes where a specific time has been given. So in my interpretation, where the life or the life of the members, as long as it falls within that year, has not been changed. So I totally support this bill in entirety. It will actually be a considerable and a very important consideration of this House to save the agony of our pupils, our students, our teachers, so that it can be very, very convenient for even the learning fraternity in this country. The other reason I would like to support this bill is because it has also, as has been indicated by the chair of the committee, the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee, is that it has also won the support of the majority of the Kenyans. And it has already met the threshold in the Constitution that it has to go through the public participation. That has been done, Mr. Speaker. And if Kenyans have agreed, who are we as the House to refuse to agree with what they really want? And actually, I've also gone through my constituency, not through because I also was seeking their opinion on this bill. And a majority of them actually are agreeing with the amendment. And actually, if I'm here representing the Geshogo people, and that is what they require, then I am in order. I'm actually representing them, and I'm actually, when I support it, I'm representing the people of the Geshogo, and actually they really want that date to be moved to December. And for avoidance of doubt, I repeat, there is nowhere we are extending the life or the period of the presidency in my interpretation of the Constitution, because it falls within.
The Honorable Angwenye, you have just walked in. I understand you are saying that you are the leader of majority that... oh.
Brother, now, thank
the
you, my brother.
The Honorable Serem, you are also much lower in the order of things here.
Serem,
the Speaker,
I've been here since morning.
The Honorable
anyway.
Serem, order. The Speaker was just speaking to the eldest member of the House. I have not given him the opportunity to speak.
And
I was just engaging.
For only 5 minutes.
In all events, the opportunity is going to this side now, and the opportunity to speak now is for the Honorable Mukwana Kamala, the member for Lurambe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure that being a preacher, the Holy Spirit has spoken to you. I rise to support the Honorable Member for Kiminini in the amendments that the election date be moved from August to December as in the amendment. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to repeat. I want to take a very short time because I know there is a lot of interest in this. And mine is just to say that I concur with the fellow members that there is so much that we interfere when we have an election in August, especially the school calendar. So many activities, especially children's school, exams, and if there is a rerun, we pull that into the exams, national exams. So it's going to be very good if we can change. And I was listening to the leader of majority, Mr. Speaker, and the Kenyans. The reason why we are here is because all Kenyans cannot be here. We cannot have 40 million Kenyans sitting in this house. So we sit here on their behalf. And what we say on their behalf. And I'm so happy to hear the chairman of the relevant committee concerned that having gone out in public participation, the views of the majority of Kenyans is that we change the date. That's a traditional date. December has always been there, and it's been very good. Think about August. Think about the primaries, the nominations. They begin around April. And you know the campaigns for the nominations, they begin in January. So we have a whole year running politics, blaring speakers, out there with sound systems, interfering with the learning of students. And it goes on. The election cycle is like a whole year. So, Mr. Speaker, while we are here, we don't want to think that we are just speaking on our own behalf. We are not just speaking, like I am not just speaking like Titus Hamala speaking, but I speak for the people of Lurambi constituency. I speak for the people in Kakamega, that when I go back to them, they will say, our member of parliament spoke what we would have spoken if we had an opportunity to be in that house. And Mr. Speaker, as I finish, I want the members of this house to know that they speak for Kenyans, to know that they are here because 40 million people cannot sit in this honorable house. And that's why they brought us here. And when you are a leader, Mr. Speaker, you are not supposed to be a kind of person who shall go back. My people tell me what to do. My people show me the way. My people show me you. God has put you there to lead. So through the Holy Spirit, he guides you with some anointing to lead correctly, Mr. Speaker. I support the member of Kiminini, and God bless you. Hallelujah.
The Honorable Kamala, you are absolutely right. And that is why you are called representatives of the people. So you are here to represent all those people who cannot be in this house. So your views are the views of Kenyans, and they must count. I will give this opportunity to the Honorable Serem now, the member for Aldai, although he's sitting on this side.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Relax.
The senior most.
Mheshimiwa.
Let him speak. The honorable,
so next time you
you
just come on time. Honorable Speaker, I rise to air my views on this motion, Mr. Speaker. One, when I had comments from my respected member of parliament from Garissa town, I became very concerned, Mr. Speaker. Any member in this house, we are equal before the guys that elected us from our constituents. Even if you have different opinion, Mr. Speaker. Even if you have a different opinion, Mr. Speaker, you have only one vote in this house. Mr. Speaker, and if anyone had a different opinion, Mr. Speaker, the same bill came before this house and was committed before a committee. If anyone has a different view, could have appeared before the committee and expressed their views, and not to intimidate members of this house. Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, I have a lot of respect to Article 118 of our Constitution, Mr. Speaker, where public participation is paramount. The consultation is high, to Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Millie Odhiambo, your consultations are a bit loud.
Too high. Mwadime, give me an opportunity to articulate my point of view.
Yes. What is out of order, the Honorable Millie Odhiambo?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Mwadime wants to verbally challenge me where he's sitting, which I think is unprocedural, on the issue of ranking. And Mr. Speaker, I think as members of the Commonwealth, and our Speaker has just been elected as the chair of the Parliamentary Association of the Commonwealth, the practice of ranking is, it's guaranteed, it's there. Mr. Speaker, and ranking, that's why I'm not even complaining when the chair of the legal committee has come and found us here and has spoken and has left. When I came here for the first time in Parliament, we all knew if we saw people like Honorable Martha Karua, and we've been sitting here and they start to just say, oh my God, and you move on for another day. So, Mr. Speaker, I think I'm not speaking for myself, because I know there are many other ranking members. I know I'm not likely to get a chance. But when Honorable Angwenyi comes in the House, he's the most ranking member, Mr. Speaker. We ought to take cognizance of that, Mr. Speaker, and not argue, because even these honorable members who are here for the first time, we are praying for them to come next time, and they will be ranking members, Mr. Speaker.
Very well,
so really we should, even if you don't give me a chance, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Honorable Angwenyi is the most ranking member, Mr. Speaker. We need to take that into.
Very well. The Honorable Millie Odhiambo. Order members. Order members. There is nothing out of order. You will allow the Honorable Serem to complete his contribution.
Thank you for that, Mr.
The Honorable Member for Mwatate, there is nothing out of order. You don't need to carry up your hands. We know how to.
I'm the one on the floor, and if you are
The issue
asking
of
for
ranking
open
is
of
not a
order,
matter that is before this House. It is an extraneous matter to the motion that is before this House. And the only person who is now on the floor speaking is the Honorable Serem, and is in order to speak. The Honorable Serem, please proceed.
I can remind him that members, my constituents are happy that I'm here. Give me opportunity to articulate my views. Article 118 of our Constitution, Mr. Speaker, give a lot of respect to the guys that elected us to this House. The committee went and met the citizens of this country. They have expressed their view that elections should be moved to December, that week of December. In this case, it will be on 19th, 2022, on Monday morning. Mr. Speaker, there are enough reasons why we should actually move the elections, Mr. Speaker. I appeared before my electorate in the last election, and we actually saw the challenges that anyone in this House experienced, unless those who were nominated, which in most cases they are in opposed of the same, because they don't have experience on an election, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I say majority. I didn't say you. I say majority of them, Mr. Speaker. Our children are so important. Their examinations are so important. An election in August actually messes up with our programs, Mr. Speaker. Tourism in this country is so important. When we talk about Masai Mara, I was there last week, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you we require tourism in this country. We require revenue in this country. And having an election in August will always disturb, and nobody wants to come to this country during election time, Mr. Speaker. We also experience heavy rains in August, Mr. Speaker. And actually that one curtails the guys that wanted to go vote for whoever they want, Mr. Speaker, to vote for. Number two, I had one honorable member talking about election is very expensive. Who said that election is cheap or justice is cheap? It is always very expensive, Mr. Speaker, to get it right. But also to remind a few that has a view that we should not change an election day because it's expensive, you should table the figures before the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee so that we can articulate. I can tell you, when we mention about extension of a term of presidency, Mr. Speaker, I'm very surprised that why are we concerned if the members of this House discuss about extending an election date, but we have no problem with Chief Justice and a few judges extending an election when they nullify an election. If the election in 2022 has an issue, the judges can nullify an election. It cannot be held on the same day. That means they can be held in a different date, which it can be 2 months, 3 months after. Who will question? It will be an extension anyway. So if we have a problem with that extension, then we should have a referendum to allow judges to extend an election. Because a reason will give us an extension, Mr. Speaker. So whether we like it or not, if there will be a dispute or a nullification of an election, definitely that election will be extended if we are concerned about a referendum, if we have to go to referendum because of extend an election. So I don't buy that narrative, Mr. Speaker. My point of view is, Mr. Speaker, we will support this motion. Majority Leader was in Parliament when Honorable Ching tabled the same bill. He never objected, Mr. Speaker. It went until the voting day, Mr. Speaker. So let us give an opportunity, Honorable Wamalwa, to articulate this motion until the far end and see the merits. Let the Kenyans, let the members vote one way or the other on this motion. And I can assure you I will support the same. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Angwenye.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Sister Millie. Now, Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this bill by Honorable Wamarwa. It's a very, very important bill. Mr. Speaker, I support it for this on these grounds. One, when we hold our elections in August, we at least spend 3 months distracting our pupils and students in school. Two, we use the schools as our polling stations, which means for the period we are preparing those polling stations, our students cannot access education. Three, August is a period when Kenyans are involved in productive work. December is a holiday period. So we can use the holiday period to do our elections. And we don't distract our Kenyans from their productive work in August. Four, Mr. Speaker, you cannot say that you will extend the life of the presidency and therefore the life of this House itself. Mr. Speaker, it's stated on the 5th year. That will still be in the 5th year. So, Mr. Speaker, we should accept that, and our people, at least the people I represent, and other people I've talked to, even if those who come outside my constituency.
The Honorable Mulolwa, you must be holding a different parliamentary session there. The Honorable Mulolwa, what is going on there?
Okay.
Let the Honorable Angwenyi make his contribution.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, most Kenyans, all Kenyans I've talked to on this issue are supportive of December elections. Actually, some of them ask me, can you bring around Mr. Wamarwa so we can look at him? You are very popular because of this bill. Mr. Speaker, like my colleague said, assuming that we still continue to hold our elections in August, so that we don't extend the period of the presidency and the parliament, if the elections are declared null and void, so that we have a runoff, like what happens in this last election, it was done in October, on 26th of October, at a period when our students are doing the exams. It added 2 months to the presidency of Uhuru for the runoff. So we are now increasing it by only two more months, borrowing from what happened in the last election. Mr. Speaker, there is a member of parliament who said this cannot help us unless we make serious reforms. Mr. Speaker, you can make reforms all at once, or you can do them one by one. We have started these reforms, these election reforms, by changing the election date. Next week, let that MP bring another reform, and we'll support him. He's going to help the Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, I know a lot of our members would want to contribute this bill, and Mr. Speaker, therefore, I'll reduce my time of speaking so that somebody else can enjoy it. I support.
Very well. Honorable members, this debate on the bill started at 11:02. The time for debate on the bill is 3 hours. We have therefore now dealt with it for 2 hours. There is a balance of time of 1 hour. Which will be available when the bill is again listed for deliberations before the House. Honorable members, the time being 1 p.m., this House stands adjourned till today, Wednesday, 29th August 2018 at 2:30 p.m.